Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you are watching first part of What If Naruto was raised by Raikage and built a new clan. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no time, let's start the story.
Yugen Tomaru felt anxious and apprehensive. But given what was happening in Konoha tonight, it's hard to blame him for that. When a figure with a sack over one shoulder fell into the clearing, he tensed, but then relaxed when he saw it was his teammate. She stood at about 5 feet 5, and was clad in standard Kumo Junin attire, navy blue pants and shirt under a dark gray vest that was awarded to ninja upon the rank of Chunin. A Kumo Hitate was attached to her belt, over the buckle. She had a slender, athletic build and a beautiful face framed by jaw-length blonde hair. Her eyes were bright green and darted across the clearing, taking in her surroundings. "Akana, I trust your part of the mission was a success." Of course, the caretaker was a retired Chunin, but aside from that there was no one with shinobi training watching over the boy, the kunoichi said, pushing a stray hair out of her face. It wasn't even difficult. "All we have to do now is wait for the ambassador to return." It still amazes me how simple it was. They sat down to wait, saying, "Quiet, it's best not to tempt fate." They waited for 30 minutes in tense silence, jumping at every snapping twig they heard. Finally, Akana looked up at the sky, calculating the time by noting the moon's position in relation to the stars. When she had reached her decision, she turned to Tomaru and said, "We need to go. Raikage. Sama won't be happy about not getting the Hyuga. If he doesn't get the boy as well, his happiness will be even lower. The ambassador might have been apprehended for being late. We will also be compromised if that is the case. It's time to leave." Tomaru started to argue but changed his mind. The two Kumo.nin fled to the trees, leaving no trace of their presence. After 3 days, Sarutobi sighed. The 3 days since Kumo's failed attempt to kidnap the Hyuga heiress had been the busiest since the Third Shinobi War. News of the ambassador's death had come to him swiftly, probably thanks to a messenger bird. They had claimed that his death violated the ambassador's diplomatic immunity, which was technically correct, and had threatened war if not compensation. Of course, Sarutobi couldn't simply hand over Hyuga Heishi, the head of his clan, for defending his own daughter. The crisis had been avoided when Hiashi's twin brother offered to be killed in his place. Sarutobi hadn't liked the outcome, but Hisashi was adamant, saying that many lives could be saved. Sarutobi made the decision to visit Naruto after the crisis was over, and he made it a point to spend time with the boy. However, when he arrived at the boy's apartment, he noticed something was off, and after a moment he realized that he was sensing a genjutsu. This caused Sarutobi to become concerned, and he sent out a pulse of his chakra, dispelling the genjutsu and exposing kindling where the door should have been. His concern increased when he entered the apartment and saw clear evidence of battle. Burn marks were all over the place, furniture was destroyed, and shuriken were embedded in the walls. He ran into the bedroom to find Rin sprawled motionless on the bed, and after a moment of panic, he examined her. Minato's student wasn't dead, but rather incapacitated by a strong genjutsu, and he put his hand on his forehead and dispelled it, which made Rin jump up in bed. "Hokage. Sama, where am I? In order to see Naruto, I came. What happened here?" "Instead, I discovered a battle-scarred apartment." Rin's bewildered scowl only grew deeper. "I'm not sure. At the celebration of our treaty with Kumo, I recall taking Naruto to watch the parade. I returned to put him to bed after that. After that, my mind simply stops working. 3 days ago," he said softly, "Kumogakure no Sato sent a delegation to sign a peace treaty with Konoha." Sarutobi closed his eyes and sighed, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. Hyuga Heishi killed the ambassador later that night while he was trying to abduct the clan's heir. The two shinobi who accompanied him were never located. For Naruto, one of them must have also come here. I sent Kakashi out with the Anbu to secure the area just outside the village because I was too busy dealing with the aftermath of the attack to come visit. The only two people who have ever visited are us. The night they tried to take Hinata must have been the same night they took Naruto. And rather than sending out tracking parties to check if the other two Kumo.nin had already escaped back to Kumo, we were more focused on ensuring they weren't in the village. We're powerless to help the boy at this point because they have too much of an advantage. After a day, the early part of their flight from Konoha had been tense because they expected Anbu pursuit, but they never sensed any signs of pursuit. They didn't let that make them careless, though, and they kept up a frantic pace as they made their way back home. As they rounded the last bend in the mountainside, they were surprised to see the Raikage waiting for them along with the customary Chunin guards. Tomaru and Akana were happy to be near Kumogakure no Sato. "I see the two of you have made it back safely," I've heard that the third of your number was not so lucky. The Yondaime Raikage was a formidable figure, solidly built at 6 feet 2 inches, with a black beard flecked with gray and an intense blue that scrutinized them from under the brim of his cage hat. His voice was soft, but so commanding that everyone seemed to stop and listen when he spoke. Raikage. Sama arrived at the designated meeting location 5 minutes late. We believed that our position was jeopardized and that he had been apprehended. We decided that the best course of action was to take the boy back to Kumo. In your position, I would have taken the same action. Hyuga Haishi killed your team's third member while he was attempting to flee the clan's compound. I've communicated with the Hokage and was able to resolve a minor diplomatic conflict. In exchange, they promised to send us Hiyashi's body. Hizashi, his twin brother, who has been branded by the caged bird seal, seems more likely to be ours. Fortunately, though, the backup plan worked. We can now make a new Kekai Genkai, even though we might not get the Byakugan. You can go home, Tomaru. Bring the boy, and follow me, Akana. The ceremony will now start. Raikage. Sama, she said as they made their way through the streets, won't we have to worry about Konoha trying to take the boy back? He turned and strode urgently into the village, forcing the shorter Kunoichi to hurry to keep up. I don't think so. The majority of the village detested him because he was the Kyuubi's container. Despite the Hokage's apparent fondness for the boy, public opinion will surely make it difficult for him to make a significant effort to bring the boy back, particularly if doing so could result in violence. He simply won't have the backing to do it. Additionally, I was able to persuade Konoha to give in to our demands. Even if the Hokage can garner support for the move, this puts them in a rather weak position to attempt to demand custody of the boy. He paused outside a building with a plain stone dome and said, "We're here." Without a word, the two entered the empty room, which had no furnishings or decorations. The Raikage pressed a panel next to the door, and part of the floor slid over to reveal a circular stairway that wound into the ground, opening into a large underground dome. A pair of pedestals rose from the floor in the middle of the room, and 16 shinobi, 8 of the best medic.nin and fuinjutsu users Kumogakure had to offer, were waiting for them. One of them looked up as the two newcomers entered. "Is he there?" he asked, pointing towards the bag cradled in Akana's arms. Wordlessly, she handed it over. The man set it on the ground and removed the child within. He was a boy of 2, with tanned skin and unruly blonde hair. There were 3 whisker marks on each cheek. The shinobi had heard that his eyes were blue, but couldn't tell as they were shut due to the boy's genjutsu. Induced slumber. He nodded in approval. "Bring her out." Another shinobi came forward with a small girl, who was also asleep, wearing a plain white robe, her long blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail, and her features had a decidedly feline quality. The 2 shinobi carried the children to the middle of the room, where they took off their clothes and set them on the pedestal. After getting out brushes and ink, they spent 30 minutes writing a complicated series of seals on the children's skin, revealing another seal on each child's belly, the seal that kept the biju they held at bay. When they were finished, they moved aside and formed a circle around the seals with 6 other shinobi. They raised their hands as one and started a lengthy and intricate series of hand seals, which required them to all be performed in unison and took hours of practice to perfect the timing. 2 minutes after the sequence was finished, the 8 shinobi knelt down and slammed their hands onto the cavern floor. Immediately, the seals started to glow white, starting at the edges and moving inward, up the pedestals, and into the seals on the toddler's skin. The children also started to glow, with Yugito's glow being a violent purple and Naruto's being red. The seals gradually absorbed their auras, funneling them down the podiums and passing through a number of seals on the floor, mingling as they went. When they finally started to return to the 2 kids, it was clear that the colors had changed as the auras crept back up the podium. Yugito's was now a vivid yellow, orange, while Naruto's was slate blue. The auras then reached the kids again and started to creep over their skin, eventually engulfing all the seals they touched and eventually leaving them unmarked, including the seals that had held the biju. The auras then started to bury themselves in the skin, creating a complicated pattern of tribal markings that eventually disappeared from view. The ritualists passed out from exhaustion and signaled that they were done, and the medic.nin hurried forward right away. The children were dressed in plain white robes, and they started performing diagnostic jutsu. They talked quietly among themselves for a few minutes after the tests were completed, and then the Raikage approached. "Well?" "Raikage. Sama, the ritual was successful. The biju have left. They were probably sent back to the demon plane for the time being. Additionally, it appears that the Kekai Genkai was successfully formed. The children's chakra coils show no excessive signs of strain, and they are in excellent health." "And their chakra capacity?" The Raikage exhaled a breath he hadn't known he was holding. As you are aware, Yugito's naturally high chakra reserves were the reason she was selected to contain the Nibi. In the boy's case, I suspect it was the same. Their reserves increased as a result of the Biju being sealed, which enabled them to keep the Yuki under control. They have been growing at the same rate as a typical child ever since, and they probably will. On an absolute scale, however, their growth will be dwarfed by that of other children because of their higher chakra capacity. They have low Junin level reserves at the moment. Very well, he said, raising his voice loud enough to fill the room. I want to thank everyone. You did a great job, and the village will benefit from what you did. He gave Yugito to the medic.nin who had spoken to him, saying, you will take Yugito back to her home. These children will help establish a clan that will fortify our village. Their surname will now be Araiki. Only the Raikage, Akana, and the young boy were left in the room after the assembled shinobi filed up the stairs after bowing respectfully. The rest of you, except for Akana, are dismissed. In reality, Akana wanted to go home and sleep because the mission had worn her down physically and mentally, but she was determined not to show that to the Raikage. Raikage. Sama, I assume you have another task for me. He turned and held the boy out to her, saying, you are right. I want you to raise the boy. His name is Naruto. Are you sure? Wouldn't it be best to raise him with Yugito? Akana asked, standing for a moment in silent shock. No, I naturally want them to become close over time. I do not, however, want them to think of one another as siblings. For the past few months, I have been observing the female Junin in this village with my Anbu. I've concluded that you are the most qualified person to raise the child based on their information. In addition, I've heard that you were thinking about adopting a child. As she thought about the Raikage's statement, Akana's hand instinctively went to the scar on her hip. He was correct. She had been told after that injury that she would not be able to conceive her own child and had been thinking about adoption, which was now her best option. She reached forward with shaking hands and took the young boy into her arms, saying, I accept Raikage. Sama. All right. A stipend will be given to you to pay for his living expenses and any necessary equipment. He and Yugito will start training at age 4. They will work with many of the village's Junin to unlock their Kekai Genkai and find a fighting style that works for it because they are the first to have it. One more thing, too. You are allowed to use as much force as you think necessary to protect him if you witness anyone, including myself, trying to hurt him outside of training sessions or tests. Hi, Raikage. Sama. Very well, you are dismissed. Akana bowed, then turned and climbed the stairwell. After leaving the building and its limiting seals, she raised one hand in a simple seal and made her way back to her house with a brief series of shunshuns. She put Naruto in her guest room bed, decided to pick up baby supplies the next day, and then, by touching a finger to his forehead, she dispelled the genjutsu and let him sleep soundly. Araiki Naruto, my son. She leaned down and gave him a gentle forehead kiss while lovingly staring down at him. Sleep well, little one. After 10 years the village had been enamored with Naruto and Yugito for the past 10 years, and it was admirable that neither of them had allowed the attention to get to them, especially since the majority of it was due to the fact that they had a new Kekai Genkai. However, a few people were impressed by their simple hard work. Akana was watching, spying on, the two as they walked down the street. After 8 years of rigorous training, the two had successfully unleashed their bloodline with some assistance, and their progress became primarily instinctual. Kumo's taijutsu master had used this instinct to help them create a complementary taijutsu style, which they had named Yaesaiken. They had also received a great deal of training in other tactics and strategy, and the mother in her was proud of them. The mother in her, a term Akana never imagined she'd be using to describe herself just 10 years ago, had her doubts when she was given Naruto to adopt, but she was ultimately grateful for the chance. Sure, the vivacious little blonde could be a handful at times, and it had been particularly difficult when his origins had been revealed to him at the age of 5. He had refused to speak to her or the Raikage for a week afterward, but he had eventually moved past it, and was even thankful when he calmed down a little. After all, he had been released from the life of a Jinchuriki. Most importantly, though, was that he still considered Kumogakure his home. He had matured quickly, already passing the genin examination. The sleeveless GI was the same shade of navy blue as Naruto's standard shinobi pants, with slate blue stripes along the seams, and underneath it was a short, sleeved shirt of steel mesh. The GI and Yugito's top had been given by the Raikage last year on the 9th anniversary of the creation of their Kekai Genkai, and on the back, also in the same shade of blue, was the Araiki clan symbol that the Raikage had designed, embroidered in raised thread. It was the slitted eye of some beast, but instead of being outlined in smooth lines, it was composed of the same patterns as those markings. Yugito, who was walking beside him, was dressed mostly in navy blue, with a few notable exceptions. She wore shorts that cinched tight just below her knees, leaving the lower halves of her legs wrapped in bandages. She wore a garment that resembled a navy blue sleeveless kimono top over her torso. Her long blonde hair was styled in a braid that reached to her lower back and was wrapped in bandages. Both Kumo.nin had a shuriken holster wrapped to their thighs. Neither wore shoes. They were walking down the street hand in hand, talking animatedly about something. They had been dating for a few months, and the Raikage's attempts to get them together had been successful. Mostly unnecessary. They had been close since they first met when they were young, but Naruto had been extremely dense. The boy hadn't even realized how deeply he felt, much less Yugito's, until she kissed him. Akana laughed when she thought back to that memory. The two young shinobi were relaxing in the treetops of one of Kumogakure's parks, listening to the sounds of children playing below them, not realizing that Akana was close by. She occasionally decided to peek as long as they weren't using their bloodline, which allowed her to avoid detection as much as possible. As time passed and the two became more capable of taking care of themselves, she spied less frequently, but she had a feeling that today would be too good to miss. She had taken note of Yugito's posture and tone of voice when she asked Naruto to join her in the park. Her interest was obvious, at least to everyone except Naruto, and she seemed to have grown weary of hiding. "Hey Naruto, have you ever thought about what it would be like to have children?" Yugito said after waiting for Naruto to glance at the kids on the other side of the branch. "No, not at all. It will be some time before we can think about that, but I am aware that the village will want children from both of us to pass on to." Rimu Yujuki. "True, you'd have to worry about a girlfriend first." "Yes, but the bloodline alone makes too many of the girls in this village swoon over me. Someone who accepts me for who I am is what I would want, but you're the only one who does." "But what?" Naruto froze. The tone of her voice told him that something was out of the ordinary. He turned to see that she had climbed to her feet and was slowly walking towards him with a perfectly neutral expression on her face. He scrambled to his feet and began to slowly back away. "But what Naruto-kun? Am I not a good candidate for a romantic partner? Maybe I'm not attractive enough, or my personality bothers you?" Naruto's back bumped into the trunk of the tree as Yugito continued forward. "Well, what is it?" It's just that, why? You've never seemed to see me that way and As Yugito's face lit up with laughter, Naruto's voice trailed off. "You really can be so dense sometimes." "Yumea," Naruto said, his eyes widening. In the back of her throat, Yugito made a tiny sound of impatience. "Sometimes you just talk too much." Before Naruto could reply, she pressed herself forward and kissed him, enjoying the sensation of his taste, smell, and touch for several minutes before reluctantly breaking the kiss and turning to walk slowly to the end of the branch. "Yugito-chan, you're going to come get me tomorrow at 5? "What?" Yugito leapt from the branch and hurried back home, grinning contentedly. "For our first date, and it better be good." Naruto grinned broadly as he walked into the classroom on this, his last day at the academy. He and Yugito had been receiving private tutoring for as long as they could remember, and by the time they were permitted to enroll at the age of 8, they had learned almost everything the institution had to teach. The two had wanted to skip the academy entirely, but the Raikage and their parents had been adamant, stating that it would benefit them to engage with their peers more and that they didn't want to appear as though they were receiving preferential treatment simply because of their ancestry. The buzz of conversation in the classroom subsided as the Chunin instructors stepped to the front of the class. Satoru Sensei was a little short, standing at about 5 feet 6 inches, solidly built, with a gruff voice and a bald head. As usual, he was dressed in standard Chunin attire for Kumogakure, and the class respected him greatly. Rumors had it that he could easily become a Junin if he didn't enjoy teaching so much. He soon felt the familiar sensation of having too many females focusing on him at once, but they had stopped flirting with him so overtly since he had started dating Yugito, or at least since she had knocked one of the more persistent ones into semi-consciousness. "Listen up," he said, clearing his throat and projecting his voice across the room. Satoru grinned, saying, "Today, myself and 2 other instructors will test you to see if you're worthy of becoming shinobi of Kumogakure." Teaching his class discipline and respect had been worth it, but it was unfortunate that they would be graduating so soon. The few students who had continued to speak abruptly stopped. "There won't be a written portion to the test. You couldn't have progressed this far if you didn't know the fundamentals that the academy requires. The exam's first 3 sections will take place outdoors. You will be put to the test in taijutsu, stealth, and accuracy with thrown weapons. After that, we'll return indoors for the exam's ninjutsu section. You must receive at least 70% to pass, and the results will be average." You will fail the test if you score less than 50 on one section or less than 60 on two or more. Do you have any questions? He said. Good, then follow me outside and we'll begin, after the class had been motionless for a few seconds. The class followed their sensei to a wooded area behind the academy, where the accuracy test was easy. Nearly no one received a score below 80. The stealth test was more challenging, and the class was brought back inside to perform the Kawarimi, Henge, and Bunshin. However, due to their large chakra capacity, Yugito and Naruto used the Seiteki Bunshin no Jutsu instead. Overall, the class passed, with Yugito and Naruto at the top. They then sat, with Hittites tied around various body parts, while they awaited their team assignments. I want to congratulate you all, Sotaru said as he stood in front of the class and started speaking. You have started down the path of the shinobi by graduating from the academy. You are now back quote. Genin, Kumogakure's official shinobi. You have to start somewhere, even if it's not the most glamorous rank. You should be able to advance from Chunin to Junin with persistence and diligence. You have the responsibility of guiding your futures in the direction you desire. After waiting patiently for their names to be called, Naruto and Yugito finally heard. Team 4 will consist of Araiki Naruto, Araiki Yugito, and Gifu Mitoku. This was the beginning of team assignments. In room 307, your Junin instructor is waiting. As they walked to meet their sensei, Naruto turned to face his other teammate, Mitoku, who was about the same height as Yugito, about an inch and a half shorter than he was, with a katana on his back, twin kodachi at his hips, a kunai holster attached to each thigh, and countless extra packs of shuriken and senbon at his belt. He was dressed in black shinobi pants and sandals, a steel gray jacket that was unzipped in the front, a yellow shirt underneath, and a pair of straps that formed a X across his chest. Overall, he was a good fit. His ranged attacks could keep enemies at a distance, while Naruto and Yugito could clean up anyone who got too close. As one might expect from his appearance, Mitoku used weapons heavily. He was skilled with his swords but preferred to use his projectiles from a distance. To make him even more dangerous, he was proficient in Raiden Jutsu and frequently used them to charge his weapons. Blocking them would often prove painful. Naruto's thoughts were interrupted when they reached room 307. Well, he muttered, let's see who we've got. He pushed open the door and saw Akana lying on the desk, absently throwing a kunai into the air. She turned her head as she heard the door open, and the kunai stuck into the wood a fraction of an inch from her nose. The boy was sharp, but by no means gregarious, so it was usually a good idea to listen whenever he spoke. Why are you here? As she put the kunai back in her holster, Akana lifted her legs and flipped herself onto her feet, saying, of course I'm your Junin. Sensei. Why else would I be here? You're our Junin. Sensei, right? However, you reared me and I am still capable of being your Junin. Sensei, even though I raised you. And no Junin in the village knows you're too. Rimu Yujuki as well as I do. It's actually a pretty sensible decision. I'll see you in 10 minutes at training ground number 8. To find out if you would truly become Genin, you would typically be given another test. But I've known Yugito and Naruto long enough to know how it would work out. In order to assess your teamwork skills, I will instead be conducting a skills evaluation. She walked away with a crackle of static electricity. This is unbelievable. Ka-san, our Junin sensei, Naruto said, burying his face in his hands. How could I have earned this? Come on Naruto-kun, it can't be that bad. Would you want your mom to know about every single little mistake you ever made on a mission? Asked Naruto, lifting his head and giving Yugito a very level look. She would then go on to mention them frequently throughout the house, so you would never forget them. All right, you make a point. However, there is also a positive aspect to this. You are aware that your sensei will be devoted, industrious, and will do everything within her power to ensure our survival. Imagine if you had that spandex guy from Konoha that we've heard about, plus she's normal. Naruto shuddered. The tales he had heard about that man were terrible, and although he suspected they were somewhat fabricated, he never wanted to know if his suspicions were true or not. In roughly 6 minutes, Team 4 crossed the rooftops and arrived at the training ground. Well, let's get to the training ground and get this assessment over with. When they got there, Akana looked up and said, good, you're all here. Now let's see what you can do. She seemed to suddenly disappear from view as she sped towards her Genin team. Naruto cursed. He hadn't been caught by surprise and could tell that Yugito hadn't either. But Mitoku had not been expecting this, and Akana directed her first attack at him. Naruto leapt in front of the boy, bringing his arm around to parry his mother's kick. The move left him off balance and vulnerable, allowing Akana's second attack to send him flying away. Akana got to Yugito just as she was trying to pull Mitoku back. In short order both genin were sent flying away. Akana stood calmly in the center of the clearing, while her team was scattered around the edges. Well, I'm waiting. Naruto lowered himself to his knees and said, "Hey Yugito-chan," adding, "It appears that it's time to activate to Rimu Yujuki." She mumbled, "Yeah," and dropped to her knees as well. "Mitoku, stay back and wait for an opening." Yugito and Naruto raised their chakras, and the moment their bloodline activated, they both smiled and knew it was time to fight. She was an elite Junin, but Naruto and Yugito were at least high Chunin level and had excellent teamwork, and Mitoku wasn't that bad either. 30 minutes later, Akana was standing casually in the middle of the clearing, looking no worse for wear, though that was partly due to a genjutsu. Her 3 students were dispersed throughout the battle, scarred clearing in exhaustion, and Akana herself was doing her best to conceal her own fatigue. "I'm impressed. Yugito and Naruto, you worked as well as I've come to expect as a team. Although your tactics were sound and the timing will improve with time and experience, your timing was a little off when Mitoku attacked. For now, you are dismissed. I'll see you here for training tomorrow morning at 8. You will then be introduced to the amazing world of D-rank missions following lunch." 2 weeks later, Team 4 was tired of D-rank missions. Mitoku described them as menial tasks more befitting of servants than trained shinobi, and Naruto thought that was a perfect way to put it. Only one mission, attempting to capture the falcon that belonged to the ... required any shinobi skills at all. Lightning Daimyo's son. They had pursued that bird 6 times in 2 weeks, so why couldn't the man figure out how to tie it to its post? "I must say I'm impressed, that was the fastest I've ever actually seen somebody catch that bird." The Raikage's amused glance suggested that he had figured out their strategy. "Now," he said, pulling out a large folder of D-ranks, "let's see what I can give you for your next mission." They had just returned the bird to its owner, who was thrilled to have it back but a little perplexed as to why it seemed so twitchy. Team 4 chose not to mention that Mitoku had removed the bird from the air with some electrified ninja wire. "Oh no." The Raikage raised his head to look at Naruto and said in a puzzled tone, "Naruto, do you have something to say?" "Yes. You wanted us to have more social interactions, so Yugito-chan and I were incredibly bored in the academy learning things we already knew. Then all we receive for missions after we graduate are chores. Are we errand boys or shinobi? Give us a real mission, please. We're prepared for it, you know." "A drug cartel has been growing its power in the capital city of Rai no Kuni," the Raikage said, straightening in his chair and slipping into business mode. "Very well." He reached down and took a folder from the top drawer of his desk. "According to recent intelligence, he and about a dozen Ronin guards will soon be going on a brief vacation. It's your responsibility to neutralize him. It is acceptable to let the Ronin guards escape if you are compelled to, but the daimyo would prefer that you kill them. The drug lord is the main target. In order to question him, the daimyo wants him alive. But you are allowed to kill him if you have to. Do you agree to this mission?" "Very well," he said, passing the folder to Akana. "You'll be leaving tomorrow for the southwestern corner of Rai no Kuni." The 3 genin nodded enthusiastically, and Akana did not object. "As you travel, your sensei will give you an update on the mission specifics." Dismissed. 3, 2, 1, duck. Naruto began a mental countdown as the Raikage's door closed, lowering his head just in time to avoid Yugito's slap on the back of his head. "You should show more respect for the Raikage, Naruto-kun." "But Yugito-chan, he was expecting one of us to do that." "What makes you say that?" she asked, her eyes narrowing. Naruto let himself smirk at Yugito's expression, saying, "The Raikage doesn't keep mission assignments in the top drawer of his desk." He rarely succeeded in making her see her mistake, primarily because she never seemed to want to acknowledge his correctness. "Naruto," he was immediately alerted by his mother's sickly sweet tone, "the Raikage may have been expecting you to try this, but if you ever do that again I'm putting you through 4 hours of brand new hell drills." Naruto shuddered. Hell drills were created after Yaesaiken and were a chained form of several hundred attacks and blocks that should take no more than a few minutes. He would then execute the form, and if he made a single mistake at any point in the form, he would have to start over, which was a common mistake when learning a lengthy chain of moves. "Yes Ka-san. All right, you're fired. Thus, return home and begin packing." Having his mother as a Junin sensei was something Naruto truly regretted the following day. "Naruto, did you remember to pack extra kunai and shuriken?" "Yes, Ka-san. Have you packed your sleeping bag yet?" "Yes, Ka-san. Have you packed an extra pair of sandals?" "Yugito-chan and I don't use footwear. For a brief moment, it appeared as though she would truly leave him alone. "Oh, right. Did you remember to pack your underwear? Ka-san. Why didn't you check this last night before we left to see if I packed everything?" Yugito's sudden burst of laughter also did little to lift Naruto's spirits, as he slowed his pace, falling behind Akana and muttering to himself, because it's a mother's sacred right to embarrass their child, especially in front of their romantic interests. Naruto knew the journey was going to be lengthy. The trip was enjoyable overall, and after a while Akana stopped embarrassing Naruto, leaving him alone to enjoy the scenery. Rai no Kuni was a ruggedly beautiful country. It was said that Rai no Kuni was the most beautiful place in the elemental countries, and none of the Kumo shinobi had seen anything to contradict that. Rai no Kuni was covered in mountains, just like Tsuchi no Kuni, but it received much more rain and was covered in lush forests, with deep gorges, century-old trees, and views of thousand-foot waterfalls. Akana gathered her genin to discuss their strategy after Team 4 pulled within sight of their target approximately 3 days later. They chose to pull ahead a bit and set up camp after observing that the small caravan was moving at a civilian pace. "All right, I am aware that this is a fairly easy task that shouldn't present many challenges. However, you must remember that nothing is always as simple as it appears. We're going to be more cautious about this, even though we could probably just rush in and kill everyone. Yugito and Naruto will sleep during the day. You two will go out and gather information about our target as twilight approaches. The reason I've picked you two is that your lineage will help with reconnaissance, which also likely means you'll be doing it a lot in the future. There will be a time in the morning and evening when we are all awake because Mitoku and I will sleep during the night. We'll keep advancing our camp along the trajectory of our target during that time. You'll also share with me what you learned about our target the night before in the morning. Let's pitch the tents now so our scouts can sleep." The shinobi set to work, each pitching a small one-man pup tent. Yugito and Naruto climbed into their tents and fell asleep right away. Akana was staring down at Naruto when he opened his eyes after being gently shaken awake for a while. "Time for you two to go. I already got Yugito up." She handed him a slip of paper and said, "This is a tracking seal. After we move, you can locate our camp by directing your chakra toward the other half of it, which I have. On the opposite side is an alarm seal as well. I'll know and I'll be coming at a dead run if you put your chakra into it." "Thank you, Akana. Sensei," Naruto said, taking the slip and putting it in a pouch on his belt. "Yugito appears to be prepared, so we should probably start. I'll see you in the morning." "Naruto," he halted. Akana's voice had been softer and more concerned, and she was addressing him as his mother rather than his sensei for the moment. "I've spent the last 8 years instilling in your mind that you possess the abilities of a skilled shinobi. Additionally, I am aware that your ancestry will support you. But experience is what you lack. Regardless of the skill gap between opponents, life or death situations are always difficult the first time. You and Yugito may encounter one during this scouting mission, and I won't be available to assist you. Therefore, exercise caution and keep in mind that it's either you or them if it really comes down to a life or death situation. It's all that matters at that moment. There is no time to be concerned about their demise, ethics, or lost innocence. I don't know what I would do if I lost you, and it only takes a moment of hesitation for either of you to die. So please, exercise caution." It had been a long time since even Naruto, who was very close to Akana, had seen this side of her. The two remained silent for a moment. "Don't worry, Ka-san. If I can avoid it, I won't cause any of my precious people to suffer the loss of me. You are aware that I never break promises, so that's a promise." Akana smiled, since her son always seemed to be able to lift her spirits. "Good luck then, and stay safe." She watched as Naruto gave her his famous smile and hurried off to join Yugito, where they had a brief conversation before jumping into the trees and vanishing from view. For approximately an hour, Naruto and Yugito had been pursuing the drug lord and his guards. The pattern was rather straightforward. 3 guards took the lead, 4 more hung back by 3 wagons that held the drug lord and likely supplies, and 3 more Ronin formed the rear guard while the other 2 scouted the area. They eventually set up camp for the day, with the wagons drawn in close and the horses picketing. A pair of Ronin stood guard while the others unloaded supplies from the wagon. The first tent they set up was huge, clearly belonging to their target, and they went on to set up 6 more, all of which were much more practical than the first. After setting up camp, they cooked dinner and unloaded some bokken, and then they sparred with each other. Naruto and Yugito watched the spars closely, determining that while the Ronins were quite skilled for ordinary humans, they would be no match for trained shinobi. Finally, the camp settled down for the night, with 8 Ronin sleeping and the other 4 standing watch, 2 at the camp's perimeter and 2 next to their leader's tent. Yugito was stretched out in front of Naruto, with his head resting on his lap, and Naruto was sitting cross-legged on a tree branch. It had been more than 2 hours since the camp had gone to sleep, and nothing noteworthy had occurred. Naruto-kun, have you given our mission much thought? Her voice was soft, hesitant. It was a far cry from the usual tough, self-assured face she presented to the world. You mean about killing for the first time? She moved slightly, drawing herself closer to his consoling embrace. Yeah. Naruto began to caress Yugito's hair. It was one of the best ways to soothe her and calm her down, as he had discovered years before. It shouldn't come as a huge surprise to him that she was sometimes quite similar to a cat. It's like Ka-san told me, I guess. Kill or be killed. No time to think about anything else. But I somehow doubt it'll actually be that easy. I've been told it gets easier, so we just have to get used to it, I guess. That's the part that worries me. I don't want to grow cold or callous, I don't want to be jaded. And I don't want you to change like that either. Before responding, Naruto leaned back and gave it some thought. Does Ka-san seem jaded to you? What kind of question is that? She's one of the most lighthearted people I know. Yeah, and she can kill without blinking. It's something we'll get used to, something we'll adapt to. But it won't change who we are. Up at him, Yugito smiled and said, Promise. I promise, and you know I always keep my word. Yeah, you always do. She wriggled closer to him before letting herself unwind and find solace in his comforting presence. She was always thankful that she had persuaded him to date her because of moments like these. The remainder of the evening went rather smoothly. Every 3.5 hours, the watch was changed, allowing each guard to sleep for 7 hours. After waking up and preparing breakfast, the camp moved out by hitching pack animals to the wagons. They resumed their previous route of travel. Naruto pulled out the tag Akana had given him and focused for a moment, satisfied that they had seen enough. After that, the two of them leapt through the trees to report, eat, and get some much-needed sleep. The two were once again following the miniature caravan the next night. Everything was initially the same as it had been the previous evening. There were no obvious differences between Tama, at least not until after dinner, in the way they traveled, set up camp, and prepared dinner. A couple of guards got into the back wagon. A few minutes later, they came out, each carrying a woman in a shackle over their shoulder. After suppressing his first impulse to rush into the camp, Naruto put a hand on Yugito's shoulder to prevent her from acting similarly hastily. Naruto channeled chakra into both sides of the tag after taking it out of his pocket. How long? Yugito asked, leaning over and whispering in his ear. If they move at Mitoku's speed, which would be my guess, about 5 minutes. The men in the camp appeared to be working themselves into a rage as Yugito looked down at them. What if that's not fast enough? Naruto's face assumed the most terrifying expression she had ever seen on his face, and his eyes hardened. The next few minutes were the most difficult of their lives. Then we go in anyways. They heard the men's inebriated laughter and drew closer so they could get there sooner if needed. When Naruto witnessed several guards drag a woman to the ground and hold her spread eagled, he finally had enough. That's it, Megurushi no to Rimu. He tapped into a familiar power and experienced a sudden rush. From his tenketsu, slate blue tribal markings spread outward on his skin. Although there weren't many on his face, the ones that were there highlighted his whisker lines and made him look more like a fox. His hands and feet were changing, and he could feel it. Nails became lethal weapons as they grew longer and sharper. His bloodline gave him strength and speed, but not quite as much speed as he desired, and he felt a surge of power. He heard Yugito's voice joining his as he called out once more. Shite no to Rimu. His limbs started to radiate a glistening slate blue energy as the markings on his arms and legs pulsed. Yugito had undergone similar metamorphoses beside him. The only distinction was that she appeared more feline due to her yellow, orange markings and aura. The Ronin was diverted from the women by Naruto's shout, which accomplished its goal. They turned to watch Yugito and Naruto dash out of the woods at a speed they had never seen before. Before they could even react, Naruto exploded through the stunned ring of Ronin. He picked up the woman on the ground and tore her from her captor's grasp without even slowing down. A beat was followed by Yugito. Later, seizing the two women who were left, in order to get the women to safety before facing the Ronin, both shinobi immediately headed for the opposite side of the circle. In a Batojutsu attack, only one Ronin was able to respond in time, dropping his left foot back and drawing his sword. When Naruto saw it, he grimaced. He was unable to avoid it without exposing the women he was holding to the blow, so the man had timed it perfectly. He growled the name of his next state as he twisted and jumped. Mantoru no 2, Rimu. More of the slate blue chakra gushed out of Naruto's visible markings as they pulsed once more. It formed the outline of a fox and covered him in a layer that was, on average, half an inch thick. The mantle of chakra appeared to solidify once it was formed. There was no continuous movement, in contrast to most chakra displays that are striking enough to be seen. It moved only when Naruto did, remaining largely motionless. The chakra shifted abruptly, sliding off to one side as the Ronin's katana descended toward Naruto's back. The majority of the force from the katana strike was deflected by the chakra mantle and the oblique angle Naruto had changed into. The only effect was to create a long, shallow gash in his back rather than a deep cut. The cut gave him a burst of excruciating pain, but instead of letting it disrupt his focus, he didn't even flinch. While still in midair, he finished his spin and saw the woman on the ground. Leaning forward, he landed in a crouch. His right hand was cocked back with its claws spread, while his left hand was firmly planted on the ground. As soon as he touched down, he bounded forward once more, hurling the bloody sword at the Ronin. The doomed man cut again, but this time it was unsuccessful. The blade was knocked harmlessly aside as Naruto's arm, still shielded by his Mantoru no 2, Rimu, swept around in a circular parry. Naruto's world briefly appeared to come to a halt. He knew that he was getting closer to the Ronin and that his claws were ready to attack. He heard his mother's voice once more, warning him that there was no time to think, that it was either him or the enemy. In any case, he nearly did. Then he thought of the beaten woman standing behind him. When only his life was at stake, he might have found it difficult to kill, but when the life of an innocent woman was at stake, all doubt was eliminated. The man's throat was ripped out, causing a spray of blood. The first kill Naruto made fell to the ground. He felt Yugito push her back against his, her own Mantoru no 2, Rimu activated as a yellow orange cat. Their thoughts returned to the hundreds of hours they had spent training taijutsu together. The Ronin never had a chance as their minds synchronized as they got ready to fight together again. Between his hands, Naruto grasped a descending katana. With a sideways spin, he tore the katana from the man's grasp, rendering him helpless. In Naruto's wake, Yugito's claws flashed and tore open the man's stomach. His viscera spilled onto the floor as he fell. Naruto swung the blade at the next Ronin in line while still gripping it by the tip. He had no trouble raising his own blade to block. Naruto, however, had not been attempting to score a hit. Before the blades had even touched him, he had dropped the weapon and spun around. The man's sword, however, was now far to one side and high. Yugito's kick cracked his skull and smashed into his temple, leaving him defenseless. The next Ronin slashed low, but Naruto leapt over it. He leapt, his body spinning flat as he twisted. In midair, he wrapped his arms around the man's head and allowed his spin to cause the Ronin's neck to crack sharply. In front of his next opponent, he landed perfectly balanced. The Ronin would never have a chance to land, but it had already started attacking. With terrifying speed, Naruto's left hand sprang out and struck the man's chin with a palm strike, causing his head to snap up. As Naruto's body rotated, his foot claws dug deeper into the ground, gaining more traction. The windpipe collapsed under the force of his right fist as he drove it into the man's bare throat. Yugito's third kill fell to the ground as Naruto turned to look behind him. The drug lord was running with the rest of the Ronin. They at least began to run. Arcs of electricity crackled across their bodies as two of them fell to the ground, screaming. The sight of Mitoku standing 50 feet ahead of them, with Akana right behind him, caused the other enemies to halt. Despite their leader's protests, the remaining 4 Ronin swiftly made their choice. The Ronin raised their hands in surrender, and 4 katana fell to the ground. "Well, what do you know?" Akana's voice resounded throughout the prison. "It seems like you guys are smarter than you look. Mitoku, move their weapons away from them. Naruto, bind them with ninja wire. Wrists get tied together behind their back and either ankle gets tied to their neighbors. Yugito, come with me to check on their prisoners." As he approached the inmates, Naruto let go of his Mantoru no 2, Rimu, but he continued to activate the first stage of his bloodline until they were all safely restrained. Although he didn't believe he would need it against them, it did increase the level of intimidation and serve as a deterrent to any hasty decisions. As he let go of the transformation and stretched a little, he felt his body return to normal. After using Megurushi no 2, Rimu, it always took a little while to adjust to his normal form. Mitoku had a clear view of his back as he stretched. "You're injured." "Not anymore, that healing factor comes in handy. I'm going to have to get this shirt patched up though." As he concluded his sentence, Naruto saw Akana approaching. The restrained inmates writhed uneasily at the icy rage in her eyes. The men flinched as she turned back to face them. "Naruto, Mitoku. Follow me. We need to discuss our present situation. And you," she said. She formed a bunshin and quickly performed a series of hand seals. "I'll be watching over you. And if you so much as think about trying to escape, you'll wish I had let my students finish you off. Do I make myself clear?" The men in captivity sighed. Satisfied, Akana pivoted on her heel and left, her two students trailing closely behind. Before turning to her students, Akana waited until they were out of their captor's earshot. As he turned to face them, the anger left her eyes and was replaced by tender care. "How are you feeling?" It all came back to Naruto at that point. He ignored it at the time and focused on the battle at hand, burying it behind the demands of the moment. As he secured the prisoners, he had managed to keep it out of his mind even afterward. However, he could now visualize the face of his first victim as the Ronin became aware that his death was imminent. He could still feel the third man vainly gasping for air, and the second man's neck snapping. His right hand, still smeared with blood, caught his attention. "I killed them, 3 of them." His voice was barely audible. "It was just like you said. No time to think, no time to worry about morals. They were just obstacles, things I needed to get out of my way. But then, when I killed them, I felt vindicated. I was happy when they died." His tone began to fade. "Why was I happy?" Akana stated clearly and without hesitation, "Because they were wretched, evil men. They had taken those women and beaten them. They hadn't violated them yet, but you could see clearly enough what would have happened if you hadn't gotten involved. You should be proud of yourself for protecting those innocent women by killing the Ronin, even though it was your first time killing. Don't expect it to be easy, it never is. Give it time, and you'll come to terms with what you did. If any of you are having a hard time accepting what you did, come find me, that's one of my services. I can't blame you for going in when you did, but if you ever find yourself facing extremely talented opposition while you're on Team 4, remember to wait for me no matter what. Naruto, Yugito. I'm impressed with the restraint you showed today. You waited for backup to arrive, which is never a bad idea in the shinobi world. Many genin would have jumped in right away if they were faced with a situation they felt so strongly about, especially if they thought their opponent was weaker than them. But for now, we have to make some dinner and feed those women, and then we'll rest for 8 hours. Yugito will be the first watch, Naruto will be the second, I will be the third, and Mitoku will be the fourth. We'll hitch the wagons and turn them around tomorrow morning, and if we continue on the path for 2 hours, we'll come to an intersection that will lead to the nearest town, which should be reachable by dusk. After that, we'll drop off the women and the Ronin we captured, and then we'll return to Kumogakure. Oh, and I got the name of our drug lord, and his name is Reijiro. How will the former captives get back to their homes?" Akana gave herself permission to smile wryly. Mitoku appeared to be as practical as ever. The cold tone in his mother's voice made Naruto shudder a little. "We'll be arriving at a fairly large town, so quite a bit of trade goes through it. Money won't be an issue, there's enough of it in those wagons to buy them passage. They should even have enough left over to get some decent clothing." She was completely intolerant of any kind of violence against women. It was fortunate for the kidnappers that she was turning them over to the police. Their fate would have been far more unpleasant if she had chosen to deal with them directly. The following morning, the group left early. The lead wagon, which also held the women they had saved, was being driven by Akana. He was driving the middle wagon, Yugito had said to Mitoku, who had really not wanted to argue the point. Naturally, she was in the final wagon that Naruto was driving. Unfortunately, this meant she had nothing to do. She eventually became bored. She chose to use Naruto after quickly looking through the wagon's contents and finding nothing to entertain her. She tried to get his attention for the next 30 minutes. She nibbled on his earlobe, leaned in close, and ran her fingers through his hair. Stated differently, they made the decision to be as appealing and distracting as they could. Naturally, Naruto was finding it extremely difficult to focus on the current task. Yugito-chan. Yes, I'm, trying to concentrate on driving the wagon here. Any particular reason you're telling me this? Well, you're being kind of distracting. How so? Naruto growled softly from the back of his throat and then spoke in a tone that was obviously impatient. Yugito. Well, it just so happens that I'm bored, and there's nothing else of interest in this wagon. So you're just going to have to deal with it. After performing a few fast hand seals, Naruto thrust the reins into Seiteki Bunshin's shocked hands and said, "Like hell I will." As the couple was carried into the back of the wagon by Naruto's tackle, Yugito gave a little squeak of surprise and excitement. Early in the evening, Team 4 arrived in the city that Akana had described. She gave them a voucher bearing the Kumogakure seal and instructed them to find a hotel for the night after the wagons had been driven up to the station, which was maintained by the local authorities. In order to wait for Akana to arrive, the three genin quickly located a four-room suite that was built with ninja teams in mind. 4 hours later, she arrived, her face clearly displaying her displeasure. I hate dealing with administrators. I swear, the more I work with them the more I'm convinced they're all idiots, with the possible exception of Raikage. Sama. What happened? Mainly, it's just that they draw everything out. I should have been able to have everything sorted out in about half an hour. But no, I was there for 3 hours. Now come on. We're getting dinner. I'll tell you what we're doing from there. After a quick search of the city, they came across a barbecue restaurant. Akana chose to go into further detail after arriving. Well, the law enforcement agencies of this town are going to take care of the Ronin we caught. They're also going to sort through the wagons and their contents, so that's one less thing we'll have to worry about. They did try to pass off the responsibility of getting those women home on us, but I put my foot down on that. They were rather shocked to find out how adamant I could be. Akana's fingers touched the table as she finished her sentence. Ka-san, didn't you tell us not to assault civilian authorities, ever? She disregarded Naruto's later mutterings about hypocrisy and said, yes, but they were getting on my nerves. And I still expect you to abide by that rule. As an afterthought, she added, Naruto, keep your elbows off the table. I taught you better manners than that. Naturally, this prompted Naruto to launch into another tirade about how awful it was to have his mother as a Junin sensei. Anyway, since I've arranged for law enforcement to take care of that, we'll be leaving tomorrow for Kumogakure with the Reijiro. I'll carry him, which means our travel speed shouldn't suffer. So we should be back home in 4 days. Akana simply ignored him and smiled. She came to the conclusion that humiliating your child could be a lot of fun. With the Reijiro slung over Akana's shoulder and trussed like a pig, the team set out early the following morning. The whole time he was insulting them, the girls in particular. Naruto chose to give the man a fair warning during lunch after observing the less than amused looks on the faces of both females. You know, I'd watch my mouth if I were you. While it is considered unbecoming for a shinobi to strike a prisoner, many kunoichi have rather short tempers. After seeing your captives Yugito, Chan and Akana Sensei are already on a short fuse. To dodge the glob of spit that Reijiro threw at him, Naruto turned his head away. Shut your mouth, brat. I don't need any advice from a snot-nosed kid like you. Suit yourself, but don't say I didn't give you fair warning. Later that evening, Yugito woke Naruto up to start second watch. He was not surprised to see Reijiro with a split lip and a black eye when he came out of his tent. I do recall advising you to shut up. He anticipated another swift, irate, direct, uncreative, and coarse reply. Rather, he heard a quiet, low voice from his captive. You brats disgust me. What was that? Naruto asked in a cheerful voice after taking a seat on a tree branch. I said you disgust me, all of you. All full of your cheerful optimism. So sure that you're in the right, that your pure morals are absolute. Do you think we're fools? We know that the world isn't that simple. Morality and ethics are subjective, just like right and wrong. A person's actions will always be in line with their own moral beliefs, which is why elemental nations fight. Power is absolute, which is why elemental nations exist. People must figure out how to balance their morals with those of the world's superpowers. I've done it. Sure, I'll have to do things I might not like, but I'll be doing a lot more things I like, and I'll eventually be in a position of power where I can use my influence to force my morals on the world. I found a place where I can do more good than bad. You, on the other hand, have openly disregarded authority and harmed countless innocent people. Morality may just be shades of a scent of gray, but you're close enough to being corrupt that I have no qualms about stopping you. Now, if you'll stop talking, I have to keep watch. The man started to say something, but Naruto interrupted him. The man made the sensible decision to stop talking. I said to shut up. Can you do it yourself or do I have to do it for you? Mitoku, who appeared to be as tired of their prisoner as Naruto was, relieved him of his watch. Although he was much more adept at hiding it, Naruto reasoned that he would regret pushing Mitoku too far if Reijiro did. The last watch was given to Akana, who was still upset about the captive females he had retained. For the remainder of the trip, Reijiro was obviously much less vocal. But when Team 4 eventually came into sight of Kumo, they were thrilled. They wouldn't have to worry about their prisoner again after they arrived and dropped him off. A sealed letter was waiting for them at the gate, which was unexpected. Orders from Raikage. Sama. Each guard clarified. Leave your captive here. Someone will be along to pick him up soon. You're supposed to report directly to Raikage Sama's office to give your report. When Akana said, the Raikage wants an oral report about a C-rank mission, her tone was skeptical. He almost never personally debriefs shinobi about anything less than A rank. Hey, said the Chunin, shrugging, I just read the orders, I didn't give them. With a shrug, Akana let her captive fall to the ground without any fanfare. Akana ran into the village, then leapt to the rooftops and headed toward the Raikage's tower. They arrived soon after, and after she finished, Team 4 stood at attention, waiting for the Raikage to respond. Better see what he wants then. Team 4, follow me. Excellent. You handled yourselves well. He took a moment to look at the team and noticed the typical expressions of interest on everyone's faces. Now, I'm sure you're wondering why I called your team here for a personal debriefing. The truth is, I didn't call you here for a debriefing, he said. There's another C rank in you. Out of all our shinobi here, Akana has the most experience with this guy. I know it's not common for a rookie genin team to be given 2 of them in a row. Who? She said, leaning forward a little. The Raikage threw her a folder in return, and she grabbed it out of the air and opened it, looking at the picture. She glared at the Raikage with a dejected expression on her face, saying, sometimes I hate you. The Raikage simply smiled. Akana provided a thorough and in-depth account of their mission. After she was done, Team 4 stood alertly, waiting for the Raikage to react. Before he spoke, he put his elbows on his desk and leaned forward. He took a moment to survey the team, noting the customary expressions of interest on everyone's faces. Very good, you handled yourselves admirably. Now, I'm sure you're wondering why I called your team here for a personal debriefing. The truth is, I didn't call you here for a debriefing. You have another C rank. Now I know it's unusual for a rookie genin team to be given 2 of them in a row, but Akana has had the most experience with this guy out of all our shinobi here. What guy? She asked, leaning forward a little, and the Raikage threw her a folder in return. She grabbed it out of the air, opened it, and looked at the picture. She glared at the Raikage with a look of resignation on her face. He merely smiled and said, sometimes I hate you. Despite his best efforts, Naruto was unable to remain silent. Hey, 3 days ago you threatened me if I didn't show Raikage Sama more respect. He was my Junin. Sensei, I'm entitled. Yeah, of course you'd get the exception. What's so bad about this guy we need to catch anyways? She turned back to the Raikage and moaned once more, saying, we're going after Kazuhiko Izanagi. He's the most two-faced, smooth-talking, treacherous bastard I've ever met. He's probably the most aggravating and soulless person I've ever met as well. Why'd I have to go find him? He stole a document that was en route to the Lightning Daimyo, who wants it back. Izanagi specializes in stealth and infiltration, so his combat skills are severely lacking. This makes the mission a C rank. You're going because you've had more experience dealing with and finding him than anyone else in the village. Lucky me. The Raikage continued as though he hadn't heard her. Intelligence suggests that he's in Nagunta City, and that folder contains just about anything that could be of help to you. You'll have 2 days to relax a bit and brief your team. Then you head out. Are there any questions? Can't Nagao do it instead? With a level gaze, the Raikage said to Akana, he could, but I gave the mission to you. Did I mention earlier that I hate you sometimes? Leaning back in his chair, the Raikage rolled his eyes, dismissed. Akana was clearly irritated as Team 4 moved through the streets. For a few seconds, they moved silently before Mitoku finally said anything. Raikage. Sama mentioned that you've had dealings with the man before? Yeah, I've worked with and against him. The man has no morals, and no sense of loyalty to anybody except himself and anyone he happens to be working with at the moment. Like the Raikage said, he's a pushover when it comes to combat. But that doesn't mean he's not dangerous. The man is a genius when it comes to stealth and infiltration, easily better than most Anbu. He uses that ability to steal secrets and documents of all kinds. You said you've worked against him, Mitoku asked. Does that mean he actively works against Rai no Kuni? Yes and no, he's worked against our nation, but does so less than he works against everyone else, which is why he's tolerated. His actions hurt our enemies more than they hurt us. Balancing his pros against his cons, I suppose. It's a smart move on his part though. Give him one place that'll tolerate him. It's rather typical of his way of thinking. So you know a lot about him then. As promised, Akana spent the next 2 days explaining to them everything she knew about Izanagi. More than just about anybody else in this village, and I've got a day to fill you in. They gained knowledge of his appearance, demeanor, speech patterns, the minor genjutsus he could employ effectively to avoid being pursued, and much more. Despite never having been close to the man, her genin started to feel as if they knew him. As soon as the 2 days that the Raikage had granted them were up, the team departed early in the morning. They quickly gained ground and made their way to Rai no Kuni's southwest corner. They reached their destination in roughly 2.5 days, traveling at full speed. As they entered the city, they hardly slowed, heading directly for the hotel that had been reserved for them. They were a little out of breath when they arrived. To break the silence, Yugito said, "Akana. Sensei, was it really wise to enter like that? Izanagi's sure to know there are ninja about now." "That's the point. The man is extremely inquisitive. He won't be able to resist trying to figure out why we're here. And if we have him sniffing around trying to find us instead of trying to lay low, it'll be a lot easier to find him." "I see. Good. Now, he's likely to come snooping around later tonight, so we have to be paying attention. In other words, stay alert for nearby chakra signatures. Naruto, Yugito, I'm going to have one of you waiting on the roof since you two are better able to suppress your chakra signature. With luck, we can find him tonight. But for now, let's eat." After drawing the short straw, Naruto was forced to wait outside. He was crouching atop a slightly higher structure that provided a view of his hotel. His bright yellow hair was tied in a black bandana, but it didn't stop the rain that began an hour or so after he stepped outside. He was cold, drenched, and in a foul mood. He concluded that Izanagi had better arrive soon. He didn't, and Naruto squatted outside for 5 hours without seeing his target. Then, around 3 in the morning, he had a feeling. A chakra signature was coming slowly from the north. Naruto suppressed the unexpected rush of excitement because he couldn't afford to let his feelings cloud his judgment and raise his chakra. As he gradually moved, his field of vision expanded, and he noticed a shadowy figure moving slowly across the rooftops. He made his way swiftly but covertly to the hotel's roof. Akana appeared on the roof with a crackle of electricity as soon as he landed. Naruto also witnessed Mitoku and Yugito run up the side of the building and burst out the window. Akana's voice boomed, "Izanagi, we need to talk." "Akana, it's been a while, hasn't it?" Izanagi said in a smooth voice that was full of charisma, charm, and sincerity. When Yugito and Mitoku arrived on the roof with Akana, he paid them no attention at all. "Let's see no 5 years. Yes, back when we stole that trade information from the water daimyo. I'm not here to talk about the past." He abruptly broke to his right and ran toward the edge of the roof, saying, "You need to learn to relax a little. I'd help, but unfortunately I must be going. You never seem to be, always so serious and full of business." He moved, but Mitoku didn't even appear to notice. Naruto also noticed the responses of his teammates. Akana quickly raised her hands in the ram sign before pursuing him, while Yugito stared at his previous position for a brief moment before shrugging something off and running after him. Clearly, the man had employed genjutsu. Izanagi moved quickly and vanished from the rooftop in an instant. Fortunately, though, he was heading in Naruto's direction. However, it was still difficult for the previously mentioned genin to capture him. Almost instantly, he landed on the building's far corner and leapt off. When Naruto saw Izanagi move, he ran across the building and barely caught the older man by the ankle. The infiltrator was thrown back toward the middle of the roof as he spun around. Izanagi fell to the roof in an undignified heap after being taken by surprise. But he was soon back on his feet, and Naruto saw their target for the first time. The man's appearance was entirely unimpressive. He had a normal face, brown eyes, black hair, and a normal height and weight. Even his clothing was unimpressive. It was plainly cut and of dull colors. One could only determine that the man was unique by closely examining his eyes. They spoke of a lifetime of experience and possessed a shifty intelligence. Naruto observed that they were scurrying about the rooftop, clearly trying to find a way out. The smile quickly vanished from his face, and Naruto understood why. "So the fourth member of the team makes his appearance. I was wondering when you'd show up." He sensed Izanagi's backquote was laced with chakra. Words, a genjutsu based on sounds. But Naruto was able to brush it off with little effort, and it never really took hold of him. "I'm sorry, you'll find that that won't work too well on me." "Didn't work too well on your Kunoichi teammate either. You're them, aren't you, the wielders of this too? Rimu Yujuke bloodline I keep hearing about." When the rest of his team showed up, Naruto smiled. "That's right, so if you'd just cooperate for a seconda." Izanagi grinned gloomily. He moved his weight slightly, and the room was suddenly filled with smoke. "Sorry kid, but it's not like genjutsu is the only thing I've got up my sleeve." Izanagi disappeared when it cleared. Both Yugito and Naruto were moving slowly in circles, and they had performed another stage. Their Megurushi no 2. Rimu was also active. Their irises had taken on the color of their markings, and their pupils were now slitted. Additionally, there was chakra all around their ears, which resembled a cat or fox's ears. Akana said, "Well, anything?" Naruto let out a frustrated growl. "No, not even with a Shiki no too. Rimu. We can catch his scent where he was standing, but then it's like he just disappeared." The four shinobi leapt off the roof in a blur, saying, "We'll split up then. Naruto and Yugito will pair up. Mitoku's with me. Search the area in concentric circles. He must have left some trace of where he went." Standing on the top floor of the building, Izanagi exhaled a sigh of relief as he sensed them walking away. To get away from his assailants, he had phased through the roof. He had recently learned a practical escape jutsu. Since there was no sound or chakra surge like one would experience with a shunshin, it was nearly impossible to detect its use. Akana was very good at genjutsu, so he was fortunate to have it. Furthermore, too, Ramu Yajuki appeared to make its bearers extremely resistant to genjutsu, despite the fact that it helped them. He would need to spend the remainder of the night in hiding and depart the following day. A group of extremely irate shinobi gathered back at their hotel room the next morning. They had been running around the city all night and had not seen Izanagi's hide or hair. "Damn," Naruto grumbled. "I've never seen anybody just disappear like that. Not even Raikage, Sama. That's because Izanagi has trained exclusively in stealth and infiltration. I don't even know how he pulled that escape off, and I've worked alongside him before. Even when you're allied with him, he hides his abilities. He'll use genjutsu to cover up many of the things he does, and always insists on splitting up. I get the picture. Got any idea as to what he'll do next?" "Oh, that's easy, he's going to leave. Wait, all that talk about how unpredictable and secretive he is. And you can just predict his next move that easily?" "Oh, I can't predict his next move, but you just said he's going to leave." "I can predict the purpose of his next move. I know he'll want to get out of here. What I don't know is how. He could climb the walls, leave under disguise, hide in a wagon, leave under a genjutsu. There's no way to tell. So how are we supposed to catch him? We're going to patrol the city and try to sense his chakra signature." "Wonderful," Naruto said with a tone of sarcasm. "When do we start?" "Now." Naruto let out a moan. The night before he had gone out to watch for Izanagi, he had hardly slept more than a few hours. Then he squatted in the rain on a rooftop for half the night. He then ran through the entire city, in the rain, for the remainder of the night. The kami. Forsaken rain had not stopped, and he was now going to run around the city's edges. It was going to be a bad day, he sighed. However, he swallowed his grumble and jumped after Yugito as they left to continue searching the city. After 2 hours, Naruto was beginning to feel irritated and a little worn out. He had been traveling hard for 2.5 days, running around in the rain one night and then again the next day. He questioned whether he would even be conscious of his surroundings if it weren't for his inhuman endurance. Whether he had the stamina or not, his exhaustion overcame him, and he stumbled when he hit the next roof. Yugito put a hand on his shoulder to steady him. "You okay?" "Yeah, just starting to get a bit tired is all. I didn't get to sleep in shifts like the rest of you." "Then you shouldn't draw the short straw next time. If I'd have known it was the short straw, do you really think I'd have drawn it?" Naruto nodded and leaned back against a cooling unit on the roof, saying, "Whatever, just settle down and get a little bit of rest. Then we can keep going." As he allowed himself to unwind, he noticed that his thoughts were returning to his brief meeting with Izanagi the previous evening. He was bothered by something, but he was unable to pinpoint it. Hold on, that was it. He had been running eastward. They were already fairly near the city's eastern boundary, and further eastward there were no more gates in the walls. The walls themselves actually came to an end at the point where they encountered a huge set of cliffs. They were made of shale, so Izanagi couldn't have intended to climb them. Shale that was loose and slick, ready to fall and tear apart. Anyone who dared to climb it failed. Only heavily fortified warehouses that held cargo from boats traveling along the river were present, making that area of the town extremely dangerous. "That's it," he exclaimed as he leapt to his feet, forgetting his weariness. "The river." "What do you mean the river?" Last night, when he was fleeing from the rooftop, he was headed east. There's nothing east of there except warehouses and the docks. He was heading to the river, it was his first instinct. He's going to use it to get out of the city, come on. But Naruto had already left, jumping along the rooftops on his way to the river. "Wait, Naruto, are you sure?" he asked. Yugito swallowed a curse and jumped after him, using the belted radio to indicate their destination to Akana. Naruto continued until he arrived at the final tall structure that provided a view of the docks. When he got there, he stood at the edge and looked down at the streets. As Yugito touched down beside him, he said, "River huh? I don't see him." Following Naruto's pointing finger, Yugito saw a figure running down the street between rows of warehouses. "I don't know when he's leaving, Yugito-chan, only where he's doing it from." "Wait, there," Yugito said. Naruto had already left when Yugito opened her mouth to offer him a strategy for pursuing him. She complained, "He can be so impulsive at times." Then she pressed her radio's switch. "Akana. Sensei, we have visual contact among the warehouses by the river. We're initiating pursuit." Akana's voice returned, a little distorted by the static. Yugito put the radio back in standby mode and bounded off after Naruto, saying, "Understood, Mitoku and I are on our way." The blonde mentioned earlier was having fun. He put on full speed after correctly estimating Izanagi's route. About 15 seconds before Izanagi ran around the corner, he landed in the center of an alley. When he saw Naruto waiting for him, he abruptly stopped. "Oh, you too. My day keeps getting better and better." Naruto interrupted, "This doesn't have to be so difficult, if you'd just be willing to surrender the skur." As the man was hidden by another cloud of smoke. However, he managed to spot Izanagi's chakra signature sneaking into a warehouse this time. He hurled himself headlong through a window and up the wall, grinning triumphantly. He just caught a glimpse of a shadowy figure running by beneath him as he landed on a pile of crates. Izanagi caught him in the warehouse after he chased after him. But as he opened a door to escape, he was compelled to reveal himself. Yugito was running outside when Naruto reached a dead sprint and nearly bowled him over. "About time I found you. Start thinking before you run off." Naruto rubbed the back of his head and smiled sheepishly. "Hey, sorry Yugito-chan. Guess I just got carried away." "Obviously. Anyways, Akana. Sensei should be here soon. Then we should be able to get him." In an instant, Naruto's expression changed from one of sheepishness to one of seriousness. "Wait, you mean she's not already here?" "No, she's on the far side of the city with Mitoku. Why?" "He said you too. When Izanagi saw me he said, 'Oh, you too.' He had someone else chasing him as well, and if it's not Akana Sensei, then we've got competition." "Yeah," Naruto said as the recognizable Megurushi no To Rimu markings appeared on his skin. Shortly after, he activated a Shiki no To Rimu. He sighed briefly, still in awe of the extent to which his senses had been sharpened. He caught the scent of Izanagi and turned his head slightly. The two shinobi took off at a dead run, saying, "This way, come on." They had to quickly capture their target now. However, Izanagi was quick and managed to take them on a thrilling chase. Additionally, he managed to return to areas with a higher population. Naruto learned that the hard way, almost tripping over a girl wearing purple as he turned a corner. As he ran by, he briefly caught her by the shoulders to steady her. Her screams of rage echoed in his ears as he continued running. They charged into a building only to discover it empty, bringing their chase to a sudden, if hopefully temporary, end. Akana landed behind them at that precise moment. "Where is he?" Naruto growled at himself for allowing the man to escape. "Good question," he said. "He's just so damn slippery, we can't keep track of him. He has to be close though, we saw him run into this building and we aren't under a genjutsu. Oh, he also alluded to someone else trying to chase him down. Did he give you any clue as to who they are?" "Nope, not at all. All I know is that we're probably not the only ones trying to catch this guy." The genin were about to agree when an explosion erupted throughout the district, most likely from a large explosive tag. "Nothing ever seems to go well that involves this guy. Okay, from now on we move as a unit. Let's see if we can sense his chakra, we need to catch him fast." After exchanging looks, the four of them hurried away. After a minute or so, they reached the smoking crater. After exchanging a few sniffs and consulting with one another, Naruto and Yugito turned to speak to their teammates. There were 4 people here. Izanagi was one, along with another male in his 20s. There were also 3 people about our age, 2 male and 1 female. Akana was studying the crater when she looked up. Must have been another genin team. Did anybody get caught in the blast? Doubtful. There's no blood. Okay then, start trying to find chakra signatures. See if you can pick out a group of 3 that have reserves around genin level. The other team searching for Izanagi saw him last, so they'll have a better idea of where he is now than we do. They're also going to be a lot easier to sense than he is. Hell, the Junin with them might be easier to sense than Izanagi. Both Yugito and Naruto said, "Got them," at the same time, having recognized the 3 genin's chakra signatures almost immediately. Akana, who had also noticed the signatures, nodded. As Team 4 started off, Akana saw something. "Okay, Let's go. They're moving towards us. Naruto laughed. Hopefully that means they're herding Izanagi in our direction. Before he spoke, Mitoku made a quick adjustment to the kodachi at his hip. That is a distinct possibility, and a most welcome one at that. I've grown weary of chasing this one. Wow, Mitoku, that has to be the most words I've ever heard you speak at once, Yugito said, raising an eyebrow. Before Mitoku could respond, Akana interrupted. The four shinobi charged ahead in the tense silence, each hoping that their pursuit was finally coming to an end. Quiet, if Izanagi is coming towards us, we don't want to alert him of our presence before he arrives. Talk if you have to, otherwise keep your mouths closed. As they turned a corner, Izanagi was running in their direction. Four more shinobi turned that corner as he skidded to a sudden stop and spun around. All of them had Konoha Hittites. A bearded Junin took a cigarette from his mouth and stomped it out under his heel, meeting Akana's gaze. You were one of Kumo's diplomats. It's been what now, 10 years? Yeah, 10 years, she said, turning to face her entourage. It should go without saying, but we can't let them get that scroll. Well, looks like you'll get a bit of a fight after all, the Junin said, turning to face his teammates. For Akana, the situation was best summed up by the dark-haired boy standing behind his sensei. How troublesome. Izanagi scanned the teams at either end of the alley, looking back and forth. Izanagi was suddenly the target of 8 disbelieving looks. Well, I certainly seem to be popular today. Why don't you just duke it out and the winner can come find me? He asked. The alley fell into a tense silence as all three sides readied themselves for battle or flight. What, I thought it was at least worth a shot. Suddenly it broke. Naruto was shocked to discover that he did, in fact, recognize the purple-clad girl who had just emerged from behind her sensei. Hey, you're the guy who almost ran me over earlier, he exclaimed. You should be more careful. That street was all muddy, and you almost knocked me down. Ino, this isn't the time, but Asuma, sensei. I said this isn't the time. Right now we have a real problem. There was a small emphasis on the word genuine. We need to get that scroll off of him. I'll take Akana, the Junin with them. The three of you are going to have to get that scroll off of Izanagi. Shikamaru, do you think the three of you can handle that? We'll have to see. I don't know anything about their capabilities yet. Well, try anyways. With a sigh, Shikamaru said, how troublesome. Akana glanced at her group. The Junin with them is Sarutobi Asuma, the Sandame's son. You're not ready to face him yet, so I'll have to deal with him. His genin team looks like they're related to the Ino. Shika. Cho trio from the Third Great Ninja War, probably their children, so be careful. Just remember, we need to make sure that Izanagi doesn't get away too. The Ino. Shika. Cho trio have significant political influence in Konoha, and they have significant influence in Konoha. We're already on shaky terms with that village, so no killing unless you have no choice. With his claws flexed and his hands balled into fists, Naruto reactivated his Megurushi no 2. Rimu and said, this is just a mess, isn't it? At the far end of the alley, Asuma's eyes narrowed. Huh, I've never seen anything like that before, and to not use any hand signs. It's their bloodline, too. Rimu Yajuki. It was created 10 years ago by some sort of sealing incident. Naruto's eyes narrowed as he turned to face Izanagi, activating Shite no 2. Rimu, which caused his limbs to outline in chakra. He leapt forward at a dizzying pace and said, you really need to learn how to shut up sometimes. Asuma also swore and jumped forward, which caused backquote to react similarly. Akana. Izanagi swiftly concluded that discretion was preferable to bravery after glancing at the enemies advancing from both sides. He scaled the walls, sticking to them, and escaped danger. Asuma and Naruto were left slamming into one another. Naruto's thoughts were similar to Izanagi's, and he recalled Akana's warning. He reduced his speed a little so that Akana could overtake him. Then he sped off to one side and abruptly stopped just before he reached Asuma. With his trench knives at his sides, Asuma was ready to repel the broad, sweeping strikes that were always delivered with claws. This was fully exploited by Akana, who sent him reeling after putting a punch through his defenses. As he staggered back, he acted instinctively and swung his trench knives across. Akana recoiled as her intuition told her something was wrong. A full foot away from Asuma's knife, she noticed a deep gash appear in the alley wall, proving that her caution had paid off. Naruto ran up the wall after Izanagi, but that was all he saw of their battle. Shite no 2. Rimu gave him a speed boost, which helped him catch the man rather quickly. Yugito soon followed him. Izanagi went to ground, at least figuratively, after realizing that running would not get him anywhere. After landing on a roof, He turned to confront his assailants. Before Naruto broke the silence, they stood looking at one another for a moment. "So, you've finally given up on running away, have you?" Naruto turned around in time to see a huge green ball rolling in his direction. "Of course not, I'm just waiting for the rest of them to catch up. Most genin can't move as quickly as we can, you know." He was aware of the Nikatanku no Jutsu of the Akamichi clan and knew he didn't want to be struck by it. Unfortunately, he didn't have time to move aside even though Shite didn't have to. Rimu. Instead, as he tapped into another part of his bloodline, the chakra surrounding his limbs changed, looking more compact and intense. He growled out the name of the newest member of his bloodline, dug his feet in, and met the attack. "Chikara no Tu. Rimu," he exclaimed, bringing his hands forward to stop the flying ball of Akamichi at a distance of roughly half a foot. But the halt was short. Lived. As the Akamichi continued to roll, Naruto felt himself being gradually pushed back. There wasn't much space between him and the roof's edge, so he growled once more as he peered over his shoulder. He was going to be pushed off if he didn't take action right away. A thought came to him, and he smiled. He would be in a lot of pain if it didn't work. Oh well, nothing was gained and nothing was risked. He flung himself back, letting the Akamichi roll forward and landing flat on his back. Naruto moved fast because he didn't have much of an option but to run over. He lifted the bulk of the Akamichi into the air by heaving upwards and sliding his feet beneath its leading edge. He allowed the rolling attack to come dangerously close by bending his knees and elbows. He couldn't carry this much weight for very long, even with the strength this part of his bloodline gave him, but he didn't have to. He rocked back on his shoulder blades and pushed his limbs straight upwards with a cry of effort. The Konoha Nin skittered across a nearby rooftop before collapsing into an alley as he threw the Akamichi off him. At the expression of shocked amazement on Ino's face, Naruto flipped to his feet and allowed a wry smile to appear on his own. "Naruto, watch the shadow." Yugito's voice jolted him out of his momentary reverie. He looked down at the roof and noticed a shadow snaking towards him from the pineapple-haired boy standing on the roof's corner. He bounded back, hopping nimbly across the roof before the shadow. Naruto leapt back from the shadow and glanced at Izanagi. Yugito growled and made a move to obstruct Izanagi's escape, saying, "Yugito, he's using this as a distraction to get away." Regretfully, the Akamichi chose that time to jump back up onto the roof. When he arrived, Yugito was forced to skid to a stop, giving Izanagi a clear path to escape. However, he was soon compelled to stop too. Mitoku's presence was announced by 3 kunai that embedded themselves in the roof before him. "This is so troublesome." Naruto turned to face Ino, the one who had posed the query, and asked, "What do you mean, Shikamaru? Sure, it's a fight, but they're just genin like us." "It's not just a fight, Ino. We need to keep track of Izanagi too. We also have to worry about their bloodline, which we know very little about." "Oh." Shikamaru glanced at his fellow teammate. "Choji, how are you feeling?" In between potato chip bites, he responded. "A little sore, that throw was impressive. I've never even heard of that happening to anyone in my clan." "Yeah, he's pretty good. And we haven't even seen what his teammates are capable of yet. But since Izanagi mentioned that the girl shares a bloodline with him, it's likely that they have similar capabilities. The other one seems to be a weapons specialist, but aside from that we know little about them. We don't really even know too much about the guy who tossed you. Our capabilities, however, are more well known due to the fame of our fathers." He breathed deeply. How troublesome. Naruto swiftly looked around the rooftop to gauge the situation. "Yugito, try to get that scroll from Izanagi. Mitoku, you're with me. We need to keep the Konoha Nin off of her back." Mitoku nodded with agreement. Naruto led his Chikara no Tu. Ramu Wayne and said, "All right, let's go." Akana skillfully dodged Asuma's knife slash by spinning backwards. She had quickly discovered that using her kunai to block those knives only resulted in holding halves of the kunai. His next blow caused her to stumble, allowing the knife to slit her abdomen deeply. As she vanished, swirling into emptiness, Asuma scowled. Asuma simply kept using his blade to sweep, making a small cut on his forearm and using the discomfort to break the genjutsu more readily. It was discovered that Akana was standing with her arms folded in front of her at the alley's entrance. Are the knives really necessary? Neither of us wants to create an incident by killing the other during a C rank. Ignoring her earlier remark, Asuma straightened up and asked, "It's him, isn't it, Uzumaki Naruto?" Akana's eyes narrowed, and she was careful not to show any signs of alarm or surprise. "He's an Araiki, not an Uzumaki. Besides, he's not a Jinchuriki and he has a bloodline." Neither of which were true for Uzumaki Naruto. I never said I had it all figured out, but there are too many coincidences. He's the right age, he's got blonde hair, and blue eyes. Let's not forget that his Junin Sensei is the one who kidnapped Naruto, it's him. Akana grimaced, realizing that she couldn't possibly say anything to convince him otherwise. You're not taking him. Diplomatic relations be damned, I'll kill you before I let him go. For a moment, Asuma was surprised at how fierce her voice was. I'm not trying to kidnap him, don't want to put my team in any more danger. Right now I'm just worried about Izanagi. Keep it that way. Shoji's giant hand slammed down on the roof, but Naruto jumped away to avoid it. Avoiding Shikamaru's inquisitive shadow, he transformed his leap into a handspring. When Choji discovered that his Nikudenku no Jutsu made him a simple target for Mitoku, he gave it up. Unfortunately, Choji's increased size gave him additional toughness, which the weapons specialist had miscalculated. Despite receiving a nasty shock, the boy was not rendered unconscious as Mitoku had intended. With Shikamaru supporting him with his Kagemain no Jutsu, Choji was now closely occupying Naruto. Along with Ino, he was using his throwing weapons to block Mitoku's blows. For Genin, Naruto had to concede that they were rather good. It was time for a change of pace. He smiled, his legs becoming limbed in chakra with a familiar lightness. He rushed forward with a sudden burst of speed, saying, Shite no to, Rimu. Though Choji didn't fully understand Naruto's new speed, he swept an oversized arm at him. After waiting until the very last moment, Naruto merely hopped over the arm and sped ahead. He ran the remaining distance. Choji fell back, desperately attempting to maintain some distance. Choji slashed at Naruto from the side as he closed in. With a hand on the ground to keep his balance, Naruto flung himself violently to one side. He released his legs and flipped up onto his hands. He could have opened Choji's throat with his foot claws if he had wanted to, but he chose to simply knock him out of the fight for a while because he had been instructed to specifically avoid casualties. Choji was rendered unconscious when his first foot struck the side of his head. Choji clutched his throat and retreated as Naruto's second foot struck his throat. As his feet hit the floor, Naruto's gaze shifted between his other two opponents before he hurried Ino. He was aware that the closer he got to Shikamaru, the more dangerous he would become. Naruto would have less time to respond to Shikamaru's shadow the closer the two were to one another. Hopefully, he would have time to reach the shadow user before Choji returned to the fray after dealing with Ino first. Naruto, it's a trap. Naruto looked around again after hearing Mitoku's warning, noting a few details that had seemed unimportant at first. Shikamaru's shadow organically blended with another shadow from a taller building off to the side because of his location. That same area of shadow was where Ino stood. In addition, Shikamaru had both hands held in front of him and his back was turned. Naruto was now prepared to wager that they were held in the final hand sign for the Kagemain no Jutsu, even though he had previously believed they were holding kunai to deflect Mitoku's own projectiles. Naruto suddenly realized that Shikamaru had accurately predicted Naruto's overall strategy for attack, even though he was unsure of the precise approach. He had set up his trap knowing where Naruto would go as soon as the Kumo.nin did. It was too late when the blonde attempted to veer to the side. From the bigger patch, a tendril of shadow emerged and clung to his own. The sound of the shadow user's slack drawl made his body freeze. Kagemain no Jutsu success. Mitoku was already moving when Ino turned to exploit the situation. He tossed a pair of wire attached kunai. She was pushed back as the makeshift bolos swirled through the air, crackling with electricity. She continued to dodge and move steadily away from Naruto as he followed up with a stream of senbon. As Ino was gradually pushed away from Naruto, Shikamaru sighed and watched plan a burn in the fire. He tried to reposition Naruto by lifting his foot, but it was difficult, but he had a backup plan. Shikamaru and Naruto both remained motionless despite his best efforts to pull his foot up. Incredible, he thought to himself, to resist my Kagemain this much with just brute strength. It was true that he was only using his chakra to keep his feet affixed to the roof, so he said, I'm not using brute strength, yet. Tree walking wasn't all that different from it. As Naruto used his Chikara no to Rimu, the chakra around his limbs tightened and became more intense. But that does seem to be my best course of action. He quickly put his newfound strength to the test by extending his foot into a wider stance. As Shikamaru struggled to keep Naruto motionless, perspiration trickled down his brow. Nevertheless, Shikamaru felt his foot slipping on the ground due to the blonde's unrelenting strength. As I suspected, your Kagemain links our movements together. Not only are your movements forced upon me, but mine are forced upon you as well. The jutsu just gives you an advantage in the resulting competition of strength. Shikamaru clenched his jaw. This was the first time it had ever happened to him. His own jutsu was totally overwhelming him. He could, however, slow Naruto down. He ought to be able to buy Choji enough time to launch an attack. Then he experienced a sudden wave of incredulity and felt himself bending at the knees. Surely Naruto couldn't have figured it out? With Shikamaru in tow, Naruto leapt. Both boys were briefly lifted off the ground for the brief hop. However, both boys lost touch with their shadow in that moment. Shikamaru's shadow instantly returned to its typical length. The Kage no Jutsu was broken in that moment. As soon as he hit the ground, Naruto was on the move, freed from Shikamaru's limiting influence. He caught Choji's massive fist with one hand as it descended in a hammer fist strike. He turned to look calmly at Choji, who was trying to free his hand and was red-faced from effort. He would have continued, but he could already see Shikamaru's shadow stretching out of the corner of his eye. "I'd have thought," Naruto said calmly, "that you'd have known better than to try that on me." Instead, he spun around and threw Choji again using leverage and momentum. Shikamaru had just a second to open his eyes before his teammate's size knocked him off the roof. Naruto actually reached the roof's edge before both of his airborne opponents by using his Shite no to Rimu. He saw Asuma and Akana locked in combat as he peered down into the alley. It appeared that their battle had led them in the same direction as their students. With her back to him, Akana failed to notice the two Konoha.nin in the air. Asuma executed a clumsy disengage that left both fighters unsteady and stumbling backwards. Shikamaru and Choji flew into Akana, giving her a brief moment to consider his decision before she fell. Naruto was on the move already. As he went down into the alley, he changed to Mantoru no to Rimu and bore down on Asuma. Asuma spun around and slashed his trench knife in response to Naruto's approach. In response, Naruto violently pitched himself to the side, supporting himself with a flat hand on the ground. He could have stayed out of position for his own counterattack if he had avoided the slash entirely. Rather, he made a small enough movement, confident that his Mantoru no to Rimu could manage the remainder of the assault. He was mistaken. He felt the blade tear his protective chakra mantle like tissue paper, and his eyes grew wide. He threw himself backwards, sustaining a gash on his arm, abandoning his attack. He was relieved to discover that it still had its entire range of motion when he experimentally flexed it. As he felt his wound heal, he turned back to Asuma. He let it fade as he spoke, bringing up Chikara no to Rimu instead. Wind chakra channeled along the blade to increase its length and sharpness. Never actually seen somebody do that before. It appears my Mantoru no to Rimu won't be as much help as I had hoped. Asuma remarked, interesting, as the two exchanged a series of experimental assaults. I would have expected you to use your bloodline to increase your speed. Naruto snarled his response, ducked another knife slash, and punched. Naruto was right, and Asuma's regard for the genin increased significantly. You know why I didn't? In an effort to close the distance between them, almost any green opponent would have chosen to use the speed boost. However, Asuma had previously observed Naruto using it and had been paying attention. Though it only accelerated the user's limbs, Shite no to Rimu did offer an incredible speed boost. When it is in effect, backquote. The hands and feet would be too much for the head and torso to handle. Shite no to Rimu had its applications, but it wasn't a good fit for taijutsu between expert fighters. Asuma briefly had the impression that he was playing shugi while he considered different strategies and situations. After deciding on his strategy, he launched a barrage of savage blows. Frustrated, Naruto gritted his teeth. It was not hard to avoid any of Asuma's recent attacks. They were, however, well positioned and constrained Naruto's choices. He had little control over the hurting that was taking place. Asuma then saw his opportunity. After rolling to the outside, both of his blades snapped in either direction toward Naruto's neck. The boy's defenses had already been breached by his knives, and Naruto had nowhere to flee due to the wall behind him. You could force a surrender if you put a blade on either side of the boy's neck, Asuma thought. To stop the trench knives, Naruto extended both sets of claws, but he wasn't finished yet. And stopped them, much to Asuma's astonishment. I thought you said you'd never seen that done before. I lied. Naruto put a lot of bluster into that claim, but he didn't feel it. Although he was skilled at manipulating the wind, he was not as skilled as Asuma. He didn't want to see if his healing factor could grow new fingers because he could see the wind around Asuma's trench knives slowly cutting through the wind he had around his claws. Instead, he fell directly to the ground, letting his hair blow in the wind as the blades passed innocuously over his head. He wreathed his foot in water chakra and kicked straight up, placing a hand on the ground for support. Asuma avoided the kick by millimeters, and his eyes widened as he snapped his head back. Even so, he winced as a bruise appeared on his right cheek. Asuma jumped back, allowing himself some room. He observed that until the water chakra had subsided, Naruto took care to keep his foot away from any area of his body. With his knives, he reverted to a basic guard stance. His thoughts were racing because, without specific alloys, it was nearly impossible to channel pure elemental chakra into a weapon. Asuma himself employed trench knives composed of an alloy that conducts chakras. It was impressive to say the least to channel elemental chakra along bare hands and feet like that. He promised to be even more serious about the young blonde. Meanwhile, Yugito was cautiously making his way through almost complete darkness. Izanagi had led her into a warehouse. Lil slit. Like windows high on the walls provided the only light when the lights were off. Their illumination was somewhat less than what one might anticipate on a night with stars. There were just two ways to get in and out. They had entered the building through the door leading to the roof. Yugito had used her fiery claws to weld it shut, and the edges still glowed a dull red. The other was a big sheet metal bay door. They were in their current predicament because it was impossible to open it without drawing Yugito's attention. Izanagi was unwilling to let Yugito surprise him by opening the big door, so he had vanished into the warehouse's depths. She was still attempting to catch him, so he was looking for a way to disable her so he could get a free shot outside. In fact, Yugito was having fun. She felt like a hunting cat stalking its prey as she leapt across crates with her bloodline active. It was a very energizing experience for her. Right now, she was squatting atop a big stack of crates. She was able to see through the darkness by activating her Ashiki no 2. Rimu. Nevertheless, it was hard to identify her dark target. However, she was able to follow her target as he approached the large bay door. A screech of protesting metal suddenly sounded. Naruto tumbled in after a circular piece of the door fell away. Naruto unexpectedly upended Izanagi by catching him beneath the knees. Keeping his wits about him, the blonde tore a pouch off Izanagi's belt, causing scrolls to spill onto the floor. As he fell across the floor, Naruto grabbed a scroll that was rimmed in silver and gold. As Yugito landed next to him, he clambered to his feet. As Asuma leapt through the opening he had created in the door, Naruto turned to look at her. Got the scroll, Yugito? Chan, let's get out of here. Oh, you need that scroll? Asuma approached a red scroll, flipped it into his hand, and slid his foot beneath it. We were sent for this one. Wait, Naruto replied, you mean to tell me that this entire fight was all for nothing? Asuma lighted a cigarette and then answered, I guess so. I hate this mission. Outside the warehouse, the two teams gathered. Shortly after the scrolls were recovered, Izanagi had departed, seeing no reason to remain. A few minor injuries had been sustained by the shinobi. After suffering a severe blow to the head during her fall, Akana was somewhat dazed but quickly recovered. Shikamaru was leaning on Asuma for support after twisting his knee. An unconscious Ino was in Choji's grasp. Mitoku had brought her in, swathed in ninja wire. Asuma glanced at Naruto and said, well, assessing his battered team, there's no permanent harm done. So no hard feelings, I guess. Tell me, does the name Uzumaki mean anything to you? Naruto was moved by the name, allowing only a fleeting moment of doubt to appear on his face. Why would it? Asuma concealed a smug smile at Naruto's wording. It was both a statement and a question. The Konoha team, saying, just wondering. Well, we should get going then. I have a feeling we'll meet again. Leapt to the rooftops and quickly disappeared. As they vanished, Akana let out a sigh. Well, I'm glad that this is over. Let's get back to the hotel. I don't know about you three, but I'm exhausted. Izanagi was walking along the path that led out of the city, whistling to himself. Konoha's Team 10 caught him there, which surprised him. Other than that, however, he was happy with the outcome. The scroll had never piqued his curiosity. It was only used as bait to entice the Araikis and give him a sense of their potential. After a moment of rustling in the bushes, Izanagi was abruptly followed by a stooped figure. Akasuna no Sasori, so you decided to track me down after all. With a raspy voice, the figure now recognized as Sasori spoke. You're late. I wasn't trying to keep you waiting. Sasori chose to ignore the claim for the time being, even though it was obvious that he didn't believe it. You faced them? Izanagi kept moving forward without even glancing at Sasori, saying, of course. He was tempted to say that he detested waiting, but he chose not to upset the informant by saying, I'm waiting. For what? Sasori gave him a gloomy glance. You said you'd steal that scroll in order to draw them out, and that you'd tell me what you learned. No, I said I'd draw them out so I could learn about them. I never said I'd share any of the information with you. You implied it. The puppet master's tone was one of anger. It's not my fault if you read too deeply into my words. Now if you don't mind, I have better things to do than trade words with you. With its needle, like tip just a hair's breadth from Izanagi's throat, a heavy metal tail blasted out from beneath Sasori's robes. You forget who you're dealing with. In order to keep from impaling himself on the needle, like point of the tail, Izanagi had to pull up short. He gave Sasori a disdainful glance, and his voice became obscene. No, I've remembered exactly who I'm dealing with. Can you say the same? I may not stand a chance against you in combat, but don't think I haven't made arrangements in the event of my death. You kill me here and the leader of every ninja village worthy of the name will learn about Akatsuki. Your members may be powerful, but can you take on the whole world? Sasori's answer was a warning as well as a concession, not yet. Sasori stopped as Izanagi went on, vanishing around a bend in the path. Then leave me the hell alone. A figure rose from the ground, but he didn't even look sideways. The newcomer wore a black cloak that matched Sasori's in that it was embroidered with red clouds. His black and white face was partially obscured by a pair of what appeared to be leaves that rose from his shoulders. Sasori didn't turn to face him until the figure had completely risen from the ground. The name was said as a greeting, Zetsu. I didn't think Izanagi would be so challenging. Zetsu answered in a peculiar toned voice. His unwillingness to cooperate was not unanticipated by Pain. Sama. I will get information on them personally. Why does Pain care so much about these two? They're not even Jinchuriki. He believes that their bloodline may be capable of controlling Biju, much like Mokuton or the Sharingan. Even if that's not the case, he thinks that they may be able to act as a conduit for returning the Kyuubi and Nibi to this world. Rumor has it that they once housed the two. Sasori hadn't expected Zetsu to answer, but he didn't. Rumors you uncovered, I presume. Pain hadn't taken a personal interest in recruiting since he sought Deidara to replace Orochimaru, so he was only slightly impressed when Akatsuki's spy vanished back into the earth and Sasori went off to meet up with his partner. Okay, the Araikis were impressive, but apparently too much for their own good. Sitting behind his desk, the Sandaime Hokage listened to his son report on the most recent mission his team had undertaken. To be honest, he was baffled as to why Asuma had insisted on delivering this report in person. Indeed, they had come across and engaged in combat with a foreign genin team. However, such incidents were not unheard of, and no serious injuries had resulted. In order to avoid saying it in front of his genin, Asuma was holding back from telling him something. After waiting for the report to be completed, he leaned forward in his chair and threw the genin out. After they departed, he focused entirely on his son. So tell me, what's so important that you needed to give this report to me in person? Asuma chuckled a little before his face quickly became serious, sharp as ever pops. One of the genin we encountered went by the name of Araiki Naruto. But that wasn't his given name. The kid was born as Uzumaki Naruto. Sarutobi was interested in that. You're sure? Yeah. He's the right age, blonde hair, blue eyes, and his Junin. Sensei was Naruto's kidnapper. It's him, I know it. There are a few things I don't have figured out yet though. He stopped and continued. Naruto no longer holds the Kyuubi. There was no trace of demonic aura throughout the entire fight. He also had a Kekai Genkai called to Rimu Yujuki. Leaning back in his chair, the Sandaime smoked his pipe and pondered for a while. After a little fidgeting, Asuma lit a cigarette. The Sandaime broke the stillness as smoke swirled through the air. Tell me, Asuma, do you know how Kekai Genkai are formed? Not a clue, but I have a feeling that you're about to tell me. Not many people know about this, but Biju have an obscure and complex honor system. Even I know very little about it, but I do know this. Biju hold themselves responsible for the misery their Jinchuriki experience. The honor code I mentioned compels them to compensate the Jinchuriki for that misery. Most of the time, the Biju decides to bestow a Kekai Genkai. How come I've never heard of this before? And if it's true, why aren't Jinchuriki viewed as a blessing instead of a curse? This village loves bloodlines so much that they all but kiss the ground where Uchiha Sasuke walks. The process of creating a bloodline, even for something as powerful as a Biju, is a rather slow process. It involves altering the host's very DNA, no small feat. Once the DNA is altered, it can take a long time for the bloodline to manifest. Tsunade told me it had something to do about cell replication. Whatever the reason, it is rare for the Jinchuriki himself to ever manifest the bloodline. The first person to use it would usually be his or her child. However, since Jinchuriki are so hated, many of them don't have children and their Kekai Genkai dies out before the world even knows of it. If they do have children, well, the bloodline is usually assumed to have been developed by the child or passed down by the other parent. People are foolish enough to fabricate their own reality if they so choose. But from what you told me, Naruto probably wouldn't have exhibited his bloodline for years. He's using it now, and so is that girl with him. Yugito, I think her name was. That is curious. You mentioned that their bloodline was created by a sealing incident, and that Naruto no longer held the Kyuubi. A little over 10 years ago, Jiraiya was gathering information on a young Jinchuriki in Kumogakure, but the Jinchuriki seemed to vanish. It was soon thereafter that we began to hear whispers of a new bloodline in Kumogakure. They may have used some sort of Fuinjutsu ceremony to tap further into the Biju's powers and form the bloodline more quickly. Is that even possible? I don't know. Fuinjutsu has never been my greatest strength, and such a ritual would be extremely complex. I would not even dare to attempt such a thing. I'll have to speak with Jiraiya about it next time he comes to the village. But the important thing is that the son of Namikaze Minato has managed to purge himself of the Kyuubi and develop a Kekai Genkai. Asuma's cigarette fell to the ground as he stared in disbelief. The Sandame turned his chair around and looked out the window that overlooked Konoha, allowing himself a tiny smile. I wonder how the village will react to the news. No Kuni Rai hunched over a bowl of cereal. Naruto was attempting to get his mind clear of the haze of sleep. He was not doing very well. Akana appeared to literally bounce across the room with a bright smile on her face, which only made him angrier. Someone seems to be having a good day. Of course, I'm finished dealing with Izanagi. That never fails to cheer me up. You'll probably have to deal with him again sometime. But not now. If you say so, I just can't wait to get back to Kumogakure. We're not going back to Kumo, at least not right away. What? Why not? We've completed our mission. We're personally delivering the scroll to the daimyo. Messenger Hawk came in this morning with the request. How long is it going to take us to make it to the capital from here? Naruto sighed and returned to his breakfast, saying, about a day and a half, then 2 to make it back to Kumo. We'll leave at noon. The journey to the capital went smoothly. They arrived at their destination without incident because none of the bandits who lived in Rai no Kuni were foolish enough to attack a group of shinobi. The group earned their first glimpse of the city by climbing the top of a small hill. The genin's breath was taken away. Kumogakure was where all 3 of them had lived for the majority of their lives. The village was rich and successful, but it was also built with military objectives in mind. As a result, there wasn't much in the way of ornate architecture or anything similar. The city was built with practicality in mind, giving its own shinobi every advantage while impeding any intruders who might manage to get past the walls. Kumogakure was not generally built with aesthetics in mind, though there were a few exceptions to this. Rulia clan estates tended to be a little more opulent. Rai no Kuni, the capital city, was not like that. It was also a very wealthy city. However, they weren't scared to show it off like Kumogakure did. Towers, adorned with elaborate carvings, rose into the sky. The landscape was peppered with statues honoring the country's past shinobi and civilian heroes. It was a breathtaking sight, even from afar. One that none of the genin had ever seen before. With her genin team all gazing in wonder at the scene in front of them, Akana cast a puzzled glance their way. Before they could reply, she went on, "Impressive sight, isn't it?" Her genin fell in line behind her as she walked down the slope towards the city, saying, "Well, come on. I'm sure the daimyo would like that scroll back soon." They entered with relative ease, joining the crowd that was streaming through the gates. To the chagrin of Yugito and Naruto, they then continued to move through the streets at a civilian pace. They approached the daimyo's stronghold in roughly 30 minutes, built entirely of white marble and gold. It was a striking structure. Glistening towers rose into the air, giving the appearance of lightning bolts reaching for the ground due to the gold along their sides. The daimyo lived in a massive building toward the middle of the compound. At least politically, it served as the center of power in Rai no Kuni. 2 guards crossed their halberds across the entrance, stopping them at the gate that surrounded the compound. "Please state your names and the reason for your visit." "I am Yorika Akana. This is my genin team, composed of Gifu Mitoku, Araiki Yugito, and Araiki Naruto. We have come at the daimyo's request to return a scroll stolen by Kazuhiko Izanagi." The 2 guards dutifully moved to the side and pounded the butt of their pikes into the ground simultaneously, saying, "You've been expected. The daimyo has requested that you report to the secondary waiting room for his audience chamber." A casual observer would have missed it, but the shinobi's trained eyes saw the slight depression created by the pressure plates being forced downward. The gate slid aside, and they realized it was a triggering device. Akana took the initiative, leading her group through the tumultuous interior of the compound and making it to their destination swiftly. At least by palace standards, the room was small. Mosaics illustrating notable shinobi from Rai no Kuni's past covered the walls. Since the genins had heard so little about them in the ninja academy, they attracted the most attention. Some of them even predated Kumogakure. The sound of gentle footsteps approaching from behind them cut them off from their examinations. The lightning daimyo appeared as they turned around. Not quite 5.5 feet tall, he was a short man. He was also extremely thin. However, his sheer presence more than made up for his lack of physical size. Even the Kumogakure shinobi, who spent a lot of time with some of the most deadly people in the elemental nations, were impressed by the man's ability to wear power around him like a cloak. With a respectful murmur, Team 4 dropped to one knee and said, "Daimyo, Sama." The rich sound of his laughter filled the room. In contrast to his slender frame, his voice was rich and melodic as he said, "There's no need for that. Rarely do I have the opportunity to meet with such distinguished shinobi aside from the Raikage himself. One of Kumogakure's most feared Junin, along with the 2 young bearers of 2. Rimu Yujuki. Certainly this is a pleasant opportunity. Not to mention that you 4 have done me a great service." As she spoke, Akana reached behind her and unzipped a pouch belted at the small of her back, saying, "Ah, of course." Pulling the scroll out, she presented it to the daimyo. "I should have remembered to offer it sooner, daimyo, Sama." "Nonsense, I only just arrived. There's no need for the honorific either, call me Daichi." "As you wish, Daichi-san." Daichi took the scroll from Akana and moved forward. "I trust the 4 of you could stay for a bit. I would be delighted if you could attend a banquet I'm holding tonight." "Of course." He took a step back and gave the doorframe a sharp rap. "Wonderful," he said. A servant who had apparently been waiting was revealed when it slid open a moment later. "Please escort these shinobi to the rooms I had prepared for them." The servant bowed and said, "Of course, daimyo, Sama." He then turned to Team 4 and said, "If you would follow me please." The servant then escorted them from the reception area into the actual palace. Finally, he arrived at a complex building and opened the door for them. He straightened from his bow and walked away, leaving the shinobi to their own devices. The rooms the daimyo had prepared are at the end of the hall. There is one for each of you. Naruto was thrilled to discover that his room had a tiny, private onsen after entering it. Without any delay, he undressed and dove in, enjoying the sensation of the warm water on his weary muscles. After about 10 minutes of immersion, he experienced a brief chakra surge and a jolt in the water. When he saw Yugito sitting at the opposite end of the onsen, he almost leapt out of surprise. "What are you doing in here?" "Sitting in the onsen, of course. Why aren't you using yours?" "There's no one to talk to in there." He let out a resigned sigh. "You realize I wasn't expecting you in here, right? I'm not wearing anything." With a sly smile, she pointedly adjusted one of her swimsuit's straps. Naruto sighed and sank deeper into the water, saying, "You should have planned ahead then. Nobody could claim that dating Yugito became monotonous. So, what do you think about the daimyo? He seems nice enough. But I have to wonder how much of it's genuine and how much is driven by politics." "What do you mean?" "He's in charge of all of Rai no Kuni, with the exception of Kumogakure. More than any place else in this country, he needs to use diplomacy to remain on good terms with the village. He was right when he said Ka-san is one of the strongest ninja our village has. Her name may even be up for Raikage one day. Then you have to look at us. We're the wielders of 2. Rimu Yujuki, and will almost certainly form a clan and gain a seat on the council. That we'll hold a great deal of influence in Kumogakure is almost a foregone conclusion. The daimyo will certainly want to ensure that he's on our good side. Are you sure you're just not reading too deeply into things? Do I have a choice? We are ninja after all." She moved around the onsen's edge, putting her head on Naruto's shoulder as she stopped beside him. "True enough." Naruto looked down at her as he turned his head. For her onsen dip, she had untied her hair from its typical ponytail. It now softened her features as it cascaded around her face. It was a rare occasion, but he always liked seeing her hair like this. A few of the bangs that hung in front of her eyes were brushed aside by him. "Do I ever tell you how beautiful you look with your hair down?" With a smile on her face, she huddled closer to him. "Not as much as I'd like." Naruto put his arm around her and laughed. "There's no pleasing you, is there?" "Of course there is, you just have to work for it." He pulled her in close as he tightened his arm. She wriggled a little and settled in, saying, "For you, Yugito. Chan, I don't mind one bit." After that, the pair simply unwinded and relished each other's company. It took a long time for Yugito to grudgingly wriggle out of Naruto's hold. She raised her hands and quickly shunshined away, saying, "The onsen's been nice, but I need to get ready for our banquet tonight." Naruto heaved himself out of the onsen as well after pausing to confirm that she was gone. Even before they began dating, he and Yugito had been close for many years. However, neither of them was yet prepared to cross that line after seeing each other nude. Thus, he had been taken aback when she unexpectedly joined him in the onsen. Before entering the next purportedly private onsen, he mentally noted that he needed to change into a bathing suit. After approaching his pack, he opened it. His normal ninja clothes would have to do since he hadn't packed any formal wear. At least he could change into a new pair. As he tightened the knot for his hitate, he hurriedly got dressed and slid his room's door open. Neither of the kunoichi was there, but Mitoku was waiting for him outside already. "I suppose you can always trust women to make you wait." Naruto leaned back against the wall and smiled ruefully, saying, "Indeed." He was never able to persuade Mitoku to say anything more than what the boy deemed appropriate or necessary. No worries, at least his teammate had his heart in the right place. To the uninformed observer, he might appear emotionless, but that was rarely the case. Naruto was aware that he regarded his teammates as both friends and comrades, and he was fiercely loyal to both. His thoughts were cut short when he heard a second door slide open. He looked back to see Akana come out of her chamber. Soon after, Yugito came out, and the group left the compound where they were being held. Outside, a servant greeted them and gestured for them to follow him. They were escorted swiftly into the main building and across the compound. They entered the dining hall after making a few swift turns through the building's hallways. Compared to some of the smaller houses Naruto had seen, the room was enormous. Naruto didn't realize he had stopped in his tracks until Akana gave him a gentle prod in the back. He hurried on, catching up to their guide once more. After being escorted to the main table, they were seated beside the daimyo. Naruto smiled regretfully. Politics was undoubtedly behind that, and he would probably discuss it for a long dinner. Well, at least the food appeared appetizing. The Konohagakure. There was a commotion in Konoha. Even though the story was complicated, everyone seemed to know one thing, and word has been spreading like wildfire through the streets. Namikaze Minato's son, the Kyuubi Jinchuriki, was no longer a Jinchuriki. The boy had defeated the demon fox and gained a Kekai Genkai, completing what his father had begun. The village was abuzz with that news. With delight, it was much less welcome to learn that the boy had been abducted by Kumogakure and raised there. For a variety of reasons, the village had started demanding the boy's return right away. Many people believed that if the boy had defeated the Kyuubi, he must be a strong shinobi. Who wouldn't desire such a resource? After learning that he had a bloodline, most of the village was thrilled. Kekai Genkai were practically worshipped by many Konoha residents, who would take advantage of any opportunity to introduce one to the community. The loss they still felt from the Uchiha massacre a few years ago only fueled their desire. Lastly, because of the boy's parentage, the villagers wanted him back. Many of the villagers saw his son as little more than a symbol, and the Yondaime was considered the greatest hero in Konoha. For whatever reason, practically everyone in Konohagakure wanted Naruto back. Because of the boy, some of the less intelligent residents wanted to start a war. Many others supported the idea of kidnapping him, just like Kumo had done a decade prior. Sarutobi was wise enough not to attempt either of those strategies. The boy probably didn't even remember Konoha because he had grown up in Kumogakure. Sarutobi had no doubt that the Konoha's abuse of the boy had been brought up, and Naruto's knowledge of his native village was most likely restricted to what he had been told by the residents of Kumogakure. Naruto would need to be convinced to go back to Konoha. Force wouldn't work. A good time to talk to him would be during the next Chunin exams. He would need to make sure to ask Naruto to join in. It would be challenging to persuade Naruto to go back to his native country, even with the tests. However, Kumogakure's response to learning that Naruto was the Yondaime's son could be beneficial. Since the Yondaime's actions during the Third Great Shinobi War had damaged his reputation in Kumogakure, it was impossible to predict how the village would respond to the news. 2 days after the news broke, a caravan had departed from a nearby trading village to Kumogakure, which Sarutobi assumed would become evident soon. They would undoubtedly inform Kumo of Naruto's parentage. The only thing to wonder was how the village would respond. No Kuni Rai Naruto was growing disinterested. The dinner's main topic was politics, as he had anticipated from the start. He didn't like the subject. He didn't anticipate having to deal with such topics in Kumogakure one day. Leaning back, he made the decision to check for the daimyo's guard's presence. He scowled as he began to read chakra signatures. Daichi-san, how many of you 12 shinobi of lightning do you have posted nearby as guards? 4. There are another 4 patrolling the edges of the compound and 4 are off duty. Do you have any other shinobi visiting you here? No. Why do you ask? You need to get out of here. When the daimyo turned to face Naruto, all signs of laughter vanished from his face. Is there something wrong, Naruto-san? He asked. I sense 13 chakra signatures strong enough to belong to trained shinobi nearby. 3 are from the rest of my team, and the guards you have nearby accounts for 4 more of them. That leaves 6 chakra signatures we can't explain. I don't think they're here to pay a friendly visit. Surely my guards would have noticed such a threat. Not necessarily. Our chakra sensing skills surpass just about anybody's. It's one of the side effects, so to speak, of our bloodline. Akana sat up straight in her chair. He's correct, Daichi-san. All shinobi unconsciously emit chakra, a diffusion effect of sorts. The chakra they release into the air is an interference whenever they try to sense other chakra signatures. Naruto and Yugito emit much smaller amounts of chakra. If they concentrate, they can suppress it down to practically nothing. If they say that there are 6 unexplained chakra signatures nearby, I believe them. Very well, he said as he stood up and faced the dining room. As he started to leave the table, Team 4 fell in step behind him in case something went wrong. Dinner with you all has been delightful this evening. Unfortunately, urgent business dictates that I must be elsewhere at this time. Please feel free to enjoy yourselves and remain until you are finished eating. Shortly afterward, 2 shinobi landed in front of them. Naruto observed that both of them were wearing Kumo Junin outfits, and that the swath of fabric on their belts indicated that they were members of the 12 shinobi of lightning. Daichi-san, we were unaware that you had any appointments tonight. I did not, but young Naruto-san has sensed some mysterious chakra signatures nearby. I thought it would be wise to err on the side of caution. Akana chose to interrupt after noticing the uncertainty on the guards' faces. 2. Rimu Yujuki increases their ability to sense chakra. Their skills in that regard exceed my own. Very well, we shall escort you to the bunker where we will be better able to protect the daimyo from threats. Our 2 nearby comrades will go to alert the rest of the guards. He turned on his heel and left. The other guard trailed behind the group, falling back a little. While Yugito and Akana held down the other side of the daimyo, Naruto found himself walking alongside Mitoku to one side. He swiftly triggered a Shiki no 2. Rimu, enabling his heightened senses to survey the surroundings. They waited until they had moved outside, keeping their distance for some time. Then the distance started to narrow. Yugito and Naruto glanced at each other. They're coming. With a grimace on their face, the lead guard turned around. Smart of them, I suppose, attacking before the rest of the guards can get here. You 4 ready for a fight? Naruto gave off a savage smile that made even the most seasoned guards shudder. A good shinobi always is. With a kunai in hand, the guard said, Damn kid, I'm glad you're on my side. And you haven't even seen anything yet. Mantoru no 2. Rimu erupted around Naruto and leapt to stop a pair of shuriken that were flying through the air. The shuriken glanced harmlessly off his protective mantle of chakra after a quick spin. Naruto's feet landed lightly. 6 hooded and cloaked shinobi also landed a split second later, encircling the daimyo and his guards. Akana took a half step forward. It's 6 on 6 right now. I'd like to keep a defensive perimeter around the daimyo, but that would leave at least one of us outnumbered. We're going to have to take them one-on-one. Try to end things quickly, but don't get careless. You can't let your opponent get past you. When she made her declaration, the shinobi around her all came to the same conclusion and didn't even blink. No one moved for a long time. Mitoku then moved slightly, slipping forward a foot and releasing his kodachi from their sheaths. All 6 of the shinobi vanished from view as they raced in each other's direction, seemingly in response to an unspoken cue. With a vicious punch to the face, Naruto's opponent opened. Although it was easily blocked, the man managed to grasp Naruto's forearm by twisting his hand around. He spun around briefly and made the error of trying to throw Naruto away. In response, Naruto merely dug his claws into the assassin's arm. He landed upright a few feet away from his opponent after the increased drag took away his throw's momentum. Additionally, the assassin's arm was sliced open to the bone in 5 different locations. You're too careless, trying to grapple with me like that. Didn't you even notice that I had claws? The kid was better than he had anticipated, the assassin grimaced. Fortunately, he still had some tricks of his own to perform. He charged again. Naruto rushed to confront him. The assassin swung to one side at the last second and then swept his foot out in a circle. The man felt a weight shoot out of his ankle. The ninja wire attached to it stopped its flight as it suddenly arced into a curve. Naruto had no time to respond. He was entangled by the wire, which caught him by the ankles and lowered him to the ground. Releasing the chakra that held the other end of the wire attached to his ankle, the assassin smiled. He then drew a kunai as he ran in the direction of the daimyo. Since everyone else was busy, Naruto knew he had a good chance of killing the daimyo. It would also be necessary to stop the kunai cold. There was not enough time for him to parry, and tackling the man from behind would only push him in the direction of the daimyo. Naruto was certain that the assassin would have every chance to murder his target. There was only one thing he could do. Shite no 2. Rimu rose to replace Mantoru no 2. Rimu, which waned even as he fell. Before he even touched the ground, his claws cut the ninja wire, and he was back on his feet in a split second. He hurried past the assassin on all fours because he had no other option. He stood up in front of the man with no other option. He was forced to grit his teeth in order to endure the agony of the kunai piercing his lung. Since everyone else was busy, Naruto was aware that the assassin had a direct shot at the daimyo. There was only one thing he could do. Shite no 2. Rimu emerged to replace Mantoru no 2. Rimu, which gradually faded. He hurried past the assassin because he had no other option. He stood up in front of him with no choice. With the kunai intended for the daimyo now piercing his lung, he had no choice but to grit his teeth. With a violent jerk, the assassin released his knife, splattering Naruto with his own blood. He collapsed to his knees, his lung collapsing, and he gasped in vain for air. The assassin smiled and lowered his knife to deliver the lethal blow, but a swirling wall of wind prevented him from doing so. He struggled against it, but the kunai was ripped from his grasp. He was swept off his feet and suspended in a swirling cyclone by the wind as it rushed towards him. He laughed and closed his eyes. Nice try, Akana, but your use of genjutsu is well known. The assassin was once again on the ground as a chakra pulse swept across the battlefield. But 15 feet away, Naruto was lying at his mother's feet. You're not about to catch me in a mind trick. I already have, and not the one you broke. After all, the first step to making an effective trap is to make your victim feel safe. She laughed. I can feel it. You're fluctuating your chakra, trying to see if you're still in a genjutsu. But I wouldn't be alerting you to it if you had a chance of escaping. Sure, you may be able to break it if I gave you a few more seconds, but your time is up. The assassin saw his fingers begin to twitch and jumped slightly in surprise. As he looked around, he saw that all of his allies were experiencing the same thing. You're finished. The 6 assassins fell to the ground abruptly, experiencing severe seizures. Their jaw and throat muscles were tightly clenched, which was the only reason they weren't screaming. Now die. The assassins jerked once more before becoming motionless. The smoke started to drift out of the assassin's ears as the last of Lightning's shinobi landed. Gifu gazed in unmasked wonder. Was that a... Yugito muttered, I think so, Ninpo. Seichi Konran no Ryankan. A guard from the daimyo turned to face them. What? Ninpo. Seichi Konran no Ryankan, said Akana, my strongest genjutsu. Most people think that genjutsu is a ninja art that affects the sensory perception of the victim. They are mistaken. That definition classifies genjutsu via its end instead of its mean. Genjutsu is better defined as a technique in which the user controls the chakra in his or her target's mind. It is usually used to create false sensory perceptions, but I've figured out how to do more than that. The amount of time it takes for me to pull off the technique varies. These opponents were a bit subpar, so it didn't take me long. Didn't take long to do what? To elementally recompose the chakra in their brain. That's impossible. She turned and stared incredulously at the guard. Impossible, it just happened right in front of you. I recomposed the chakra in their brain into lightning chakra. It started by affecting their nervous system. Gradually at first, a slight twitching of the extremities. But it expanded quickly enough, causing seizures. Then it fried their brains to a crisp, hence the smoke. It's the technique that made me a legend. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'd like to get some medical attention for my son. She bent down and gently placed Naruto in her hands. With a crackle of electricity, she vanished, taking Naruto with her. I've already been there, so you won't need to show me the way. Each of the 12 shinobi of lightning looked at the others. Well then, I guess we should get back to our posts. The nearest guard exclaimed, oh hell no, and was dragged down until he was eye level with Yugito. My boyfriend's in the hospital, and unlike Akana. Sensei, I don't know where it is. You're going to take me there now. A strong ninja was in the hands of Lightning Yugito's shinobi. He had faced more opponents than he cared to recall in life. Or death situations, some of whom were stronger than Yugito. However, he had the impression that if he refused her demand, he would rather confront all of his former enemies at once than face the wrath of the kunoichi in front of him. With a gasp, the daimyo's guard said, "Yes, ma'am." When Naruto woke up, the first thing he felt was a sharp, throbbing pain in the side of his chest. He vaguely remembered being stabbed there, so he accepted that the pain was understandable. He also noticed a tightness around his chest, which seemed to indicate that he was bandaged, as his consciousness started to return. There was a slight groan of pain as he moved slightly, causing his wound to throb sharply. Someone hurried to his side, and he heard a rustle of fabric. Soon after, he was given a smothering embrace that was cautious not to put pressure on the wound on his chest. His eyes snapped open with interest. The blonde ponytail hanging down gave him a fairly good clue, but the silhouette against the ceiling lights made it impossible to make out the features of the person above him. "Yugito-chan?" "Yeah," she said, holding him tighter. "How are you feeling?" I was worried. "I'm in a bit of pain, but overall I'm fine. It was just a stab to the lung." Her tone was disbelieving as she asked, "Just a stab to the lung? Just a stab to the lung, you idiot, that could have killed most people?" "We're not most people, Yugito-chan. We still have a healing factor left over from when we were Jinchuriki. The daimyo doesn't." Her expression softened. "I know, I understand why you did it, but that doesn't make it any less nerve-wracking." "Hey, sorry Yugito-chan." She smiled and leaned in to plant a kiss, saying, "Of course you are." Ah, what a cute moment. Akana had to acknowledge that the outcome of her entrance impressed her. Yugito just made the highest jump she had ever seen someone make from a prone position. Yugito whirled around after landing, flushed. "Akana, don't sneak up on us like that. But then I'd miss out on all the fun. My life would be so dull." "Is there a reason you came here, Ka-san, or did you just feel like annoying me?" Akana's smile grew softer. "Of course there's a reason. You had me worried too. That and I came to give you the doctor's report." "So how long until they release me? 1 day, 2? A week?" "What, a week? My healing factor would have me up and moving by then without medical help. What possible reason could they have for keeping me here for a week? The medic.nin here have never encountered anyone with a healing factor like yours before. They want to keep you under observation just in case." "You've got to be kidding me. I'll be fine by tomorrow, I'm certain of it." "You know how well you heal, I'll give you that. But you haven't had the years of medical training that those medic.nin have. I'm trusting their judgment on this. So if they say you have to stay under observation for a week, you're staying here for a week." Naruto attempted to speak, but Akana cut his throat. "I'm not going to argue with you about this, Naruto. I'm telling you as both your mother and your Junin. Sensei. You're staying here for a week." With a groan, Naruto fell back into the bed. He knew when he could no longer argue with her. "Yes, Ka-san." There was a crackle of electricity as Akana disappeared, leaving the young Arikis alone once more. "It's nice to see that you're not being stubborn for a change. Well, I have some business to attend to after yesterday's mess. So I'll leave you two to continue enjoying each other's company." Yugito gazed down at Naruto as if he were to blame for everything. "You know, I really hate it when she does that." "Well, what do you expect me to do about it?" As she climbed back onto the bed, she said, "Think of something as demanding as ever I see." "What was that?" "Nothing, Yugito-chan." She sighed happily as she nestled close to him and muttered something he could hardly understand. "I thought so." Naruto quickly grew tired of being bedridden. Yugito and the rest of his team paid him frequent visits, but it was hard for someone as active as he was to stay motionless for so long. He was already dressed and stretching his muscles when he woke up early on the 7th day. Yugito entered through a cracked door after he had been gone for just a few minutes. "Figured you'd be up early today. You never were much for lying around." Naruto stretched his back and twisted his shoulders, giving a small grunt. "Yeah, I still think that rest was unnecessary. I'm just glad that they're letting me get out of bed now." "Akana. Sensei says we're leaving at 10 in the morning, so you have a bit of time to stretch your legs and get some breakfast. It's going to be nice to finally get back to Kumo, isn't it?" She remembered the wild beauty of the untamed lands surrounding her home village, and a wistful smile appeared on her face. "Yeah, it sure is." It appeared that everyone on Team 4 was eager to get home. They made their way quickly and hard, reaching their hometown half a day ahead of Akana's forecast. Before long, they were surrounded by a small group of people passing through the village gates. Naruto and Yugito were the center of attention, as was customary in Kumo. with innumerable looks directed at them and conversations that were too low for them to hear. This time, though, something was different. Awe, confidence, hope, and other similar emotions were typically mixed together in the looks. The villagers' wish for the strength that Rimu Yujuki would bestow upon Kumogakure was reflected in them. However, Naruto was now able to discern new feelings from those protective looks. Anger, fear, and resentment were now present in some of the looks. These were feelings that had not been directed at the boy in a decade. It was a little unsettling. Nor did the strangeness stop there. A four-man Anbu squad landed around them after they had only been in the line for 2 minutes. Presumably the leader, one of the Anbu, turned to speak to Akana. "Karaichi Akana, we have been ordered to escort you and your team to the Raikage's office upon your arrival." She sighed. "Why would we need an escort? It's not like we don't know our way around the village. Is there an assassin hiding somewhere in there? We are not at liberty to discuss the situation with you. Raikage Sama wishes to inform you of it personally." "Okay then, let on, I guess." Yugito and Naruto exchanged anxious and perplexed looks. There was definitely something unusual going on. Furthermore, neither blonde was able to get rid of the impression that the lessons they had learned today would influence their lives for years to come. They jumped off to follow their Anbu escort, trying their hardest to get rid of the sensation. The Anbu quickly arrived at the Raikage's tower after setting their pace to Mitoku's top speed. Team 4 was taken aback once more there. It was customary to enter through the lobby. Rather, they were led directly through the open window by the Anbu team. When the 8 people landed in his office, the Raikage didn't even raise his head. "I see the Anbu is as efficient as ever. You have my thanks," and are dismissed. As the Anbu team exited the room, there were 4 blurs. "Hi Raikage, Sama." The Raikage whirled to gaze at a particular area of the wall. "You guys too." Half a dozen Anbu came out of their hiding spots and departed the room as well. The Raikage looked up at the team after the last of them had departed. He looked at their faces for a moment before saying, "A caravan arrived from Ho no Kuni yesterday. They carried some rather interesting news." Naruto appeared to be the most interested and nervous. The boy seemed to have realized that this was a problem for him. "There are rumors going around in Konohagakure. Rumors that the caravan brought to Kumogakure yesterday, and they've been spreading like wildfire. Apparently, the citizens of Konoha are saying that their Yondaime Hokage's son has vanquished the Kyuubi and gained a Kekkei Genkai in the process." Naruto gaped in silence. "You mean Yes, according to Konoha you are the son of their Yondaime Hokage. It's certainly feasible, if unexpected. You look remarkably similar to him, and it could explain why he chose to seal the Kyuubi inside of you. You think he sealed the Kyuubi into me because I was his son?" The Raikage didn't appear to be surprised by Naruto's outburst. He did sigh and recline in his chair. The Yondaime Hokage was a great enemy of Kumogakure. But there's no denying that he was a noble man who would do anything to save his village. Biju are powerful beasts who can't be defeated by normal means, and the Kyuubi is the most powerful of them all. When the Kyuubi attacked, the Yondaime would have had no choice but to seal him away. "I know all of that already." As if he hadn't heard Naruto's tirade, the Raikage went on. "As I said earlier, the Yondaime was a noble man. He likely felt that he couldn't ask any parent to sacrifice their child when he was unwilling to do so himself. I can't imagine how hard of a decision that must have been for him. How has the village reacted to this news?" Cutting straight to the heart of the matter. "Not that I'd expect anything else from you, Akana. Reactions have been mixed. There are some citizens who could care less about Naruto's parentage. They only see him as a bearer of Rimu Yujuki and a great asset of this village. There are some who are excited, believing it to be further proof that Naruto will be an excellent shinobi. The majority of the village has taken one of those 2 stances. However, there are also a few who are less trusting of Naruto now. They tend to be those who lost loved ones to the Yondaime during the Third Great Shinobi War, or the shinobi who have more of an isolationist stance regarding foreign policy. Finally, there appears to be a very few people who now wish harm upon Naruto. So far we've encountered 2, and they've both been arrested and detained. So overall, most of the village views him either the same or more favorably than before. There are some though, who are distrustful of you now. And a very few who might try to attack you. So just remember to be careful." The voice of Naruto was low and quiet as he said, "Thank you for the information, Raikage. Sama, I'll take my leave." "Naruto," his mother said with concern, "where are you going?" There was a crackle of electricity as Naruto vanished from the room, saying, "Someplace to reflect on things." The Raikage turned to face his old pupil. "How do you think he's going to take it?" With a sigh, Akana settled herself on a couch at the other end of the room. It'll be an adjustment for him. He was an orphan in Konoha, and he's been raised solely by me since I brought him to Kumogakure. He's never known a father figure before. I can't really predict how he's going to react." When they heard Yugito open the door to the office, the two adults in the room turned to face her. "Where are you going, Yugito?" "To talk to Naruto. He never told us where you went. I've been close to him for years, and spent more time with him when he's away from home than anybody. I don't need him to tell me where you went." There is some kind of memorial to their former cages in every significant shinobi village. On the side of the cliff overlooking the village in Konohagakure, their faces were carved. The techniques used in the other villages were more representative of their individual components. In Kirigakure, shinobi would use strong, durable jutsu to make realistic water sculptures of the Mizukages, who would later be crowned with their swords. Iwagakure built enormous tombs with their former leaders' effigies on top. Sanagakure incorporated tall, fluted columns with case-cage images engraved on them. They were designed to produce a melancholy whistling sound, and the constant wind was always blowing through them. It was an appropriate remembrance of their former leaders. The memorial for Kumogakure was situated in a sizable park close to the village center. The names of shinobi who lost their lives while serving their village were inscribed on 8 enormous columns that rose 800 feet into the air. An enormous dome of stained glass, strengthened with seals to withstand the severe weather that swept through the region, topped it. The stained glass showed the former Raikages looking down over the house they had vowed to defend with their lives, their backs set against the stormy clouds that gave the village its name. Yugito went there first to try to find him. She ascended to a broad ledge located 3/4 of the way up one of the columns, knowing it was one of his favorite places to think and thinking it particularly appropriate in the situation. When she heard Naruto's voice drifting down towards her, her instincts were confirmed. "I should have known that you'd find me, Yugito-chan. So how does it make you feel, knowing that the guy you're dating is the son of one of our village's greatest enemies?" Unsurprised that he had detected her approach, she scrambled over the edge of the ledge. Walking up a vertical surface while concealing your chakra signature was difficult. She leaned back on the pillar's hard marble and glared down at him. He appeared as exhausted and deflated as she had ever seen him. Apparently unaware of her stern tone, he just lay there and said, "You know, sometimes you're just an idiot. You should know by now that I wouldn't see you as the son of the Yondaime Hokage, just like I never saw you as the bearer of 2. Rimu Yujuki." Her voice softened. "You should know by now that I see you for who you are, not what you are. I always have." He sat up and looked at her, his eyes displaying a haunted expression. "But what about the rest of the village? I'm going to be hated by some of the people again, for something out of my control. I can't even remember my time in Konohagakure, but it sounds as though it was horrible. I don't want to have to go through that now." "Weren't you listening? The Raikage said that those who are judging you negative because of the news are in the minority. Besides, people in this village have been judging you based off of what you were for years, and you've never let it go to your head. Why let it start now?" She sat down in front of him, and he smiled slightly. "I guess you're right, Yugito-chan. You always seem to know what to say." He put his arms around her, drawing her close and resting his head on her shoulder as she grinned. "Of course I do." Naruto inhaled deeply, steeling himself as he inhaled Yugito's scent. "Yugito-chan." "Yeah?" Naruto hesitated for a moment. A raging torrent of emotions swirled inside him, and he could feel it. His life had already undergone a significant change today over which he had no control. He was going to start another one now. He was unable to suppress a certain amount of apprehension. On the other hand, it felt natural. He whispered, "Yugito-chan, I love you." For a moment, he was concerned about her reaction as he felt her stiffen. But only for a moment. Even though they had only been dating for a few months, Yugito and this person had known one another for as long as either of them could remember. He knew that he had nothing to worry about because he knew her nearly as well as he knew himself. She turned to face him as she writhed in his lap. With just a few inches separating their faces, he could see how deeply satisfied she was. "Naruto-kun," she said without hesitation, especially since she had just heard his confession. Only a serene, compassionate assurance prevailed. "I love you too. Yugito-chan," she said as she felt herself fall backwards under Naruto's weight. They kissed and embraced for a long time, enjoying each other's company and the declaration they had just made. They lay in each other's arms for a while after that. Tracing the symbols at Yugito's shirt's edge, Naruto was grinning. He forgot his earlier doubt. Yugito whispered, "It's a pity that we aren't a few years older." She smiled playfully and leaned in to whisper in his ear, "Then we could have really had some fun." Naruto turned red as he considered the meaning behind her comment. As she stood up and extended her hand to draw Naruto to hers, she grinned once more. Come on, we should get back. Akana has to be worried about you, Mitoku as well. Naruto accepted the extended hand and allowed her to help him stand up. The couple jumped off the column and made their way to the city proper, saying, yeah, let's go. They looked around Akana's typical haunts for a little while. They only discovered her when they checked back at the Raikage's office. She wasn't at any of them. He was a little taken aback. You're still here? I wasn't done yet. There was another important piece of information for me to tell you. Akana and I have been reminiscing while awaiting your return. Their stories are most impressive. So you're still here too, Mitoku? The news concerned our entire team. Of course I was going to say. Besides, hearing about Raikage Sama's exploits from his own mouth is quite an opportunity. I wouldn't want to waste it. Anyways, the Raikage said, drawing a scroll from his desk's top drawer. Your heritage isn't the only thing we heard about from Konohagakure. This is a letter from their Sandaime Hokage. He's requesting Naruto's participation in Konoha's upcoming Chunin exams. Absolutely not. Akana slammed both hands down on the desk. Akana, the Raikage sighed, I've decided to enroll Team 4 in the exams. Are you insane? This is obviously just some attempt to try to convince my son to stay in that village of theirs. Do you really have so little faith in me as to believe that I hadn't realized that? Your concern for Naruto is commendable. He should be a priority for you, both as his mother and his Junin. Sensei. Unfortunately, I don't have the liberty of basing my decisions off of what is best for an individual shinobi. I need to worry about our village as a whole. Regardless of Konoha's reasons, this is the first step towards a friendly diplomatic relationship they've offered in 10 years. I cannot in good conscience turn it down. But they're just rookies. They could die, or, she said, pausing for a moment because her voice was so desperate, or he could stay. Team 4 is no ordinary genin team. Yugito and Naruto could take on almost any of our Chunin in a one-on-one fight, and when they fight side by side, they could probably take on most Junin. Mitoku is impressive as well. He's incredibly talented for a genin, and I believe he's ready for these exams. No political situation could persuade me to join your team if I thought otherwise. If it weren't for those of you who have actually gotten to know him, I doubt he would be able to tolerate the hero worship he has received here. He wouldn't have any of that in Konoha, and there's no way he'd stay there. As for Naruto defecting, you should know better than I do that we don't have to worry about that. He's right, Ka-san. They'd never convince me to stay in Konoha. I may have been born there, but Kumogakure is my home. Besides, this is my chance to show Konoha what they missed out on. I wouldn't miss it for the word. Naruto had never walked the streets of Kumogakure before. The Raikage had been correct, and he was still seen favorably by many of the populace. But there were others who didn't. Additionally, they created a slight gloom over the streets Naruto traversed. However, he appeared to withstand it fairly well. He had long since mastered the art of blocking out people who would make superficial judgments about him. He was forced to be polite to more fangirls, which was one of the more annoying effects of his heritage being made public. While some of the girls appeared to be awed by his disclosed parentage, others became drawn to the sense of danger they now associated with him. Fortunately, Yugito kept them physically apart if needed. After a night of training alone, Naruto thought, it would be nice if something could get rid of my fangirl problem, as he strolled down the street. His instincts detected something unusual, and he abruptly stopped. He could feel the chakra building up, and his eyes widened. Naruto ducked sideways to avoid the lightning bolt that blasted a crater into the street where he had been standing, and Megurushi no 2. Rimu came on. The Raikage did not appear to have apprehended all those who wished him harm. Avoiding a blur that came down at him from the rooftops, Naruto rolled to the side. He was fighting either a Chunin or a Junin, and the attacking shinobi was wearing one of the gray vests Kumo gave its shinobi when they reached the rank of Chunin. Naruto carefully examined his attacker's body language before skidding to a stop on all fours. With ease, Naruto foresaw his opponent's next move and the blow before it was even launched. Despite being easy to read and probably a Chunin, the man was still dangerous. He appeared determined to kill or maim the young Araiki, and he was attacking without thinking about his personal safety. Naruto was hesitant to hurt his assailant because doing so would only make those who now despise him feel better. Regretfully, Naruto thought as he avoided another blow, which put him in a terrible position because he would be vulnerable to a deadly counterattack if he struck with a non-lethal blow. Taijutsu was therefore out. He also couldn't use wind-based attacks. They were either extremely deadly or widespread attacks. Since there was no substantial water source nearby, water jutsus were also out of the question. Naruto noted that he should remember to find a workaround for that issue in the future. But it might work in the last stage of his bloodline. Then, as the civilians hurried to get out of the way, Naruto stepped on a piece of fruit that had been knocked from a produce stall. Naruto was forced to one knee as his foot slipped out from under him. By frantically twisting to the side, he managed to avoid a kunai, but this left him vulnerable to what would likely be a rather vicious kick. He prepared for the blow, but it never materialized. Naruto was surrounded by a blur, and his attacker was abruptly stopped by two Kumo.nin who had pinned his arms against a nearby wall. A third person positioned themselves above Naruto and volunteered to assist him in standing up. "Are you alright, Naruto-san?" Naruto accepted the offered hand and allowed the shinobi to help him stand up. "Thanks for the help, I didn't want to have to hurt him. By the way, who are you?" Naruto said. "Oh, that's not important. We're just a few concerned citizens who don't like to see young shinobi get assaulted in the streets, whether they have a bloodline or not. You won't have to worry about him anymore. We'll bring him to the detention center for you." "Thanks, that's rather considerate of you. It's good to know that we still have some shinobi with their heads screwed on straight. I'm just hoping that people settle down while I'm away for the Chunin exams. I wasn't aware that we were sending any teams to Konoha." Naruto looked at a clock on a nearby building and said, "I'm a participant, and I just learned about it a few days ago, so it doesn't surprise me that you haven't heard about it." "Huh, looks like it's starting to get late. Ka-san should have dinner ready, so I should get going." "Very well, Naruto-san. I wouldn't want to make you late. Good luck at the Chunin exams." Naruto began jogging down the streets and asked, "Luck? I won't need it." Beyond Kumogakure, miles away from Kumogakure, Akasuna no Sasori stood in a clearing. He had sealed the survivor after defeating 3 Chunin a few days prior. One of his finest creations was that seal. With the exception of erasing the victim's memories of Sasori, it would not have any effect on its bearer until a specific amount of information was obtained about a particular topic. When enough information was obtained, the seal became active, causing the person to report the information to him while their consciousness was suppressed. He came to the clearing to wait for the Chunin after sensing the seal break. 2 figures landed in the clearing a short while later. One was the unconscious body of Naruto's attacker, and the other was one of the shinobi who had rescued him. "It looks as though you have much to report," Sasori replied. "You may begin." Outside of Konohagakure 3 days later, after several days, Team 4 finally came into sight of Konohagakure's enormous wooden gates as they turned a corner in a path that wound through the dense forest. None of her genin failed to notice that she had refrained from addressing the village as Naruto's home. "Well," Akana said, "there you are. Konohagakure, Naruto's first place of residence." None of them seemed to mind. Naruto did not believe that his first village had ever been a home. Furthermore, the village wouldn't be deserving of the name based on what they had heard about how he was treated during the first 2 years of his life. Naruto looked at his birthplace and adjusted the way his pack's straps rode on his shoulders. Yugito stood by his side and gave his hand a comforting squeeze as they resumed their journey. "Well, we may as well keep moving. I'm going to have to face the place sooner or later." She did it to remind him that she was there to support him, and he appreciated that. The Chunin on gate duty remarked that the pleasant thing about the Chunin exams was that it was a little more interesting to greet genin teams than it was to greet the random merchants who frequently came and went from the village. Another team wearing Kumogakure Hittites appeared on the scene, seemingly confirming his suspicions. "Hey, Katetsu, is that?" The 2 Chunin waited rather anxiously for the team to approach the gate before speaking to them. "Yeah," the other Chunin on guard duty interrupted Azuma. "I think so. It looks like the Yondaime's son has returned. Please provide your names and reason for visiting Konohagakure." Katetsu accepted the papers Akana provided, glanced at them, and waved the team through. "I'm Karaichi Akana, Junin, Sensei of Team 4. My genin team consists of Gifu Mitoku, Araiki Yugito, and Araiki Naruto. We're here because my team will be participating in the upcoming Chunin exams." Team 4 heard excited muttering start behind them as soon as they passed the guard table. It was going to be a long month, Naruto sighed. When the genin first saw Konohagakure, they thought it looked a lot like Kumogakure. There was a familiar mix of shinobi and civilians in the streets, and many of the buildings looked alike from the outside. The genin came to the conclusion that, at least in terms of appearance, there were 2 primary distinctions between the villages as they strolled through the streets. Training facilities, residential neighborhoods, and business districts were moved. Furthermore, the buildings in Kumogakure were made of stone to withstand the frequent storms that swept the region, in contrast to Konohagakure, which was mostly made of wood. In addition, there was a steady stream of whispered namikaze, samas that seemed to come from everyone's lips, and a constant muttering from those in their immediate vicinity. Although Naruto was accustomed to this treatment from his time in Kumogakure, it was far more obvious than it was in his native country. After less than 10 minutes of searching the streets for their hotel, one of Konoha's Anbu members landed in front of them. "Pardon the intrusion, Namikaze-san." Araiki halted Naruto. "Excuse me, my name is Araiki Naruto, not Namikaze Naruto." That statement elicited no obvious response from the Anbu, but a shift in expression could have easily been missed behind his mask. "Very well, Araiki-san. Hokage Sama has requested that you come to his office to speak to him as soon as is possible." Akana murmured, "Fine, I guess we can go talk to the Hokage and then find our hotel." "Hokage Sama would like to speak to Naruto-san alone." Naruto's eyes narrowed a little. Not everyone had missed the change from surname to first name. The Anbu seemed more than happy to highlight Naruto's paternal ties to the village and willing to ignore anything that separated him from Konoha. "Anything the Hokage has to say to me likely applies to my team as well. Especially since my connection with them is more than just professional. Akana has adopted me as her son. Not to mention that Yugito-chan not only shares my bloodline but is my girlfriend as well. The Hokage has Rekka. I don't care if the Hokage wants to talk to me alone. He should be happy that I've agreed to talk to him in the first place. In case you've forgotten, I'm a shinobi of Kumogakure, not Konohagakure. I owe no allegiance to the Kage of your village, or of any village besides Kumo. So I'll say this one last time, I'll talk to the Hokage with my team or not at all." After a brief pause, the Anbu said, "Hokage Sama won't like this. We've been over this before, I don't care whether he likes it or not." From behind the mask came the sound of a sigh. Naruto led Team 4 to the Hokage's tower, and for the next 15 minutes, the Anbu tried not to notice his contented grin. "Fine, follow me." After escorting them into the Hokage Tower lobby, the Anbu went to talk to the secretary. "I brought Team 4 of Kumogakure to speak with Hokage Sama." "Didn't he just want to speak with Namikaze-san? Don't remind me. Whatever, there's nobody in the office now, so feel free to send them in." The Anbu climbed a flight of stairs and signaled Team 4 to follow him, saying, "Very well." At the top floor, he disembarked and entered a room with 2 doors. "Hokage Sama," he said, "I have brought Naruto-san here to talk to you." He insisted on bringing his team with him. A few seconds passed before the Hokage responded. The Anbu pushed the door open and then moved aside to make room for Team 4 to enter. "Thank you, please send them in." A little anxious at the thought of facing one of the strongest shinobi in the world, Naruto hesitated for a moment. Sensing his hesitancy, Yugito took his hand in hers as she moved closer, supporting him and making the young blonde smile appreciatively. It also caused Akana to smile. She was ecstatic that Naruto had a girlfriend who was so encouraging, and the two would brave fire for one another. Naruto inhaled deeply, braced himself, and entered the room where the legendary professor of Konohagakure was waiting for him. It didn't take long for Sarutobi to discover that Naruto had entered the village and dispatch an Anbu member to locate him. After that, he had been eagerly awaiting the boy's arrival for the first time in a decade. By the time the door creaked open, he had relaxed. After controlling his excitement, he was rewarded with a glimpse of Naruto walking hand in hand with a young, blonde Kunoichi as he entered his office. The blonde-haired female Junin who had abducted Naruto and a solemn-looking boy who seemed to be the last member of the Genin team soon followed the two. "Hokage Dono, I was told that you wished to speak to me." Naruto's formal tone made Sarutobi wince inwardly. There was no warmth, no excitement. The boy didn't appear at all pleased to be back in Konohagakure. "Naruto, you have no idea how happy it makes me to see you in Konohagakure once more." I wasn't exactly left with much choice in the matter. It's interesting though, how I didn't hear from Konoha for 10 years. Even more so since the timing coincided almost perfectly with the village finding out that I no longer held the Kyuubi and that I now possess a bloodline. Not to mention the details of my heritage. One might find ulterior motives behind this sudden interest. This was not going as well as Sarutobi had hoped, and he did well to conceal his mounting concern. "Naruto, I've been part of a small group of people who've been trying to bring you back ever since you went missing. Unfortunately, we haven't had enough support from the rest of the village. But the situation has changed." "You mean you learned that I had a Kekai Genkei instead of a demon? And how the villagers learned that I was the Yondaime Hokage's son?" Another wince had to be concealed by Sarutobi. "Yes, but that isn't the reason I want to bring you back. But it is the reason that the rest of Konohagakure does. You were banking on that, it's why you gave them all that information." Did you even stop to think about the consequences? Stop to think about how Kumogakure would react. I've been attacked because of your lack of discretion, assaulted on the streets of Kumogakure. They may have been judging me superficially, but they still viewed me in a positive light. Thankfully they still do, but you could have demonized me. Sarutobi did sigh at that. His risky decision to inform Kumogakure of Naruto's ancestry seemed to have backfired. I'm sorry for that, Naruto, I truly am. I didn't know that you were being treated so well in Kumogakure. I thought that they would have been more regulatory, more strict. He turned to stare at Akana. I know well the lengths that Kumogakure would go to in order to obtain a bloodline. Insulting my mother doesn't help your cause, Hokage. Dono. Nor does insulting the village where I was raised. Forgive me. The past animosity between our Kumogakure and Konohagakure is not something I should have brought up. That's not what's important here. The important thing is that Konoha will accept you now. Naruto, you can come home. I will be coming home. In 5 weeks when the exams are done I'll be going back to Kumogakure. I have a mother there, a girlfriend, a team, and several instructors. There are people in Kumogakure who actually know me. No one in Konoha has seen me in 10 years. They only know what I am, and all they can do is judge me based off of superficial qualities. I get plenty of that at home. I won't have anybody who actually knows me here. I'm staying in Kumogakure, and there's nothing you can do to convince me otherwise. Don't you think it's a little too early to make that decision? Not at all. But that doesn't mean we don't have anything to talk about. Your inheritance. You live up to your reputation as the professor, Hokage, Dono. A shinobi doesn't get as old as I am without being able to read people, remember that. On to your inheritance. The Yondaime left a lot of money behind. He earned plenty with all of the S and SS class missions he took. He also left behind a fairly luxurious house in the village for you. But that's not what you're interested in, is it? No, it's not. What about the Hiraishin? I'm afraid that technique might be lost. What do you mean lost? With a sigh, the Hokage rose to his feet. He approached and took the Yondaime's portrait down from the wall, exposing a blank wall with only a blood-stained seal to mark it. The Yondaime was arguably the greatest seal master in history. He anticipated the Kyuubi's approach and made preparations accordingly. He used blood seals to secure everything he left for you, though the degree of security he employed varied. He used some of the simpler blood seals for the money in the house, which anyone with blood ties to him could release. You can try, but I don't think your blood will be able to release the seal anymore. But he was much more concerned about the jutsus he left behind. He took a sample of your blood when he made this seal, and keyed it to your DNA. Variance due to the Kyuubi wasn't unexpected, but he intended for you to claim your inheritance no later than your 16th birthday. Under normal circumstances, your DNA never would have changed this much. As Meguru Shinoto, Rimu briefly flared upon Naruto's skin, he remained silent. Drawing a line of blood, he lifted a claw to his fingertip. He lowered the bleeding finger across the seal in a diagonal motion. It gave off a faint glow before returning to its initial condition. It seems that the Hiraishin is lost to this world, sighed Sarutobi. A pity, it's always unfortunate when such valuable knowledge is lost. Well, Hokage. Dono, I'm afraid we must be going. We're still weary from several days of travel to get here and are looking forward to checking into our hotel and relaxing for a bit. Sarutobi let out another sigh. Very well, I won't keep you here any longer then. Though I do hope that you'll take a bit more time to consider your options. It's not too late to change your mind. Naruto opened the door and turned to hold it for the other members of his team, saying, No, it's not. But it's too late for you to change my mind. Goodbye, Hokage. Dono. He turned around and shut the door after they had all left the room. He became aware of the newcomer at that moment. On the other side of the door, a man was leaning against the wall. He was tall and slender. Only one eye and a small portion of the face surrounding it were visible due to the mask and hitate covering the majority of his face. Naruto instantly recognized the man because of that and his silver hair. One of the most dreaded shinobi in Konoha is Hitaki Kakashi. Naruto nearly missed another presence off to his side because he was so focused on Kakashi's unexpected appearance. Before being engulfed in a smothering embrace, he turned just in time to see a woman with brown hair. Naruto, it's really you. It's been so long. I still haven't forgiven myself for failing you that day. Naturally, Naruto was a little perplexed. Hi, who are you? She took a step back and held him at arm's length so she could see him. The traces of tears in her eyes startled Naruto a little. She appeared to be genuinely delighted to see him. My name is Rin. I was your caretaker for 2 years. Then came that night. I didn't remember it at first, but Yamanaka Inoichi was able to help me regain my memories. I had taken you to see the parade as Kumogakure's ambassador entered Konoha to sign a peace treaty. I must have been followed back to the apartment. We weren't even there for 5 minutes before I was attacked. I couldn't stop her, I lost. And then she took you away. It's all my fault. Rin gave Yugito a rather shady look when she said, you know, sardonically, not everybody is upset that Naruto went to Kumogakure, including Naruto. When she noticed Akana standing behind her student, her expression changed to one of hatred and was accompanied by a flare of intent to kill. Rin spit out, you, as her hand crept toward her kunai holster. When Naruto moved, she stiffened her legs, ready to jump. How dare you show your face here, she exclaimed. His Megurushi and Shite no 2. Rimu were both activated when he abruptly materialized behind the two kunoichi. Kakashi also made a move, emerging behind Rin and resting a hand on her shoulder. You seem to be angry, Rin, but I would not take kindly to you attacking the woman that is both my mother and sensei. Besides, Kakashi continued, we can't afford to cause an incident here. Our relationship with Kumogakure is already strained. He turned to smile at Naruto and his group. Yugito started to respond, but changed his mind when Akana nudged her in the ascent. You'll have to forgive Rin here. Back. He stared at Akana and said, you've put quite a burden on her. She's never quite forgiven herself for failing Naruto all those years ago. You're one to talk, Kakashi. How many widows lie alone at night because of Konoha's most feared assassin? True enough, I fulfill the missions I'm assigned just as you do. I've never kidnapped anybody though. Enough of this, we could spend all day sniping back and forth at each other. I assume that it's no coincidence that you met up with us here. No, it's not. The Yondaime was our Junin sensei. Rin has already mentioned that she was the boy's caretaker, and I visited him frequently before you took him to Kumo. We've been wondering how he's been doing all these years, and didn't want to miss the opportunity to see him. Your concern is appreciated, Kakashi-san. Unfortunately, this isn't the best time. As I've already told the Hokage, my team and I are weary from our journey. We'd really like to make it to our hotel. We can talk some other time maybe. Kakashi didn't express any signs of disappointment. Very well, I look forward to meeting you later. As Team 4 departed, Kakashi and Rin remained motionless, saying, until then I suppose. And until they rounded a corner and disappeared from view, Akana could feel Rin's gaze piercing her back. As they made their way to their hotel, Team 4 took to the rooftops in an attempt to prevent more incidents. Fortunately, they didn't run into anyone else and arrived at their hotel in a matter of minutes. They arrived at their room with a sense of relief after checking in without any problems. Kumogakure was never accused of being thrifty with the Araikis or their elite Junin, such as Akana. This also applied to the room that Team 4 ended up in. They were in an opulent hotel that was clearly designed to accommodate high-ranking foreign dignitaries. Additionally, it was constructed with shinobi teams in mind. Team 4 ended up in a suite with 4 bedrooms. They found that a tiny kitchenette was furnished with basic food items. The common room featured scenes from well-known shinobi battles and was tastefully furnished. To the Kumo Nin's pleasant surprise, the images appeared to highlight the adventures of every shinobi village rather than just Konoha, as one might anticipate. Naturally, that was most likely due to the fact that the hotel was hosting foreign dignitaries rather than domestic ones. They left their bags in their separate rooms before gathering in the common area. The bedrooms were also pleasant. Well, Akana replied, at least the trip hasn't been dull so far. Naruto snarled, that would have been the preferable alternative. He was seated in a couch's corner. With her head resting on his lap, Yugito was stretched out over the remainder of the couch. It's even worse here than it is back home. I'm not sure I'd say that, Yugito replied, they've been leaving me alone. Your concern is touching. I try. They could argue for a long time if they wanted to, but Akana made the decision to stop. Back to the matter at hand. The Chunin exams don't start for 2 days. That means you're going to have another day in this village without anything to do. I won't try to confine you to the hotel or anything, but I don't think I have to remind you of the delicacy of the situation. So don't do anything stupid. Hey, why are you staring at us when you say that? Because Mitoku's a lot more level-headed than you are. Your faith is touching. Akana smiled, then repeated what Yugito had said, I try. There was a crackle of electricity as Naruto vanished with a shunshin, muttering, I'm going to bed. Yugito's head landed on the couch and she turned to look at Akana irritably. Hey, you scared my pillow away. Akana smiled as she made her way to her room as well. You've got a bunch more on your bed. Get some sleep. Similar to Naruto, Yugito used a shunshin, sticking her tongue out before vanishing in another whirlpool of electricity. Mitoku and Akana simply shook their heads and took more traditional routes to their room. But when she opened her door, Akana came to a complete stop and realized why Yugito had chosen to use the shunshin. Akana had a hunch that she knew where to look for the pillows, and there wasn't a single one left on her bed. It was going to be a long month, sighed Junin, sensei of Team 4. The following morning, Yugito and Naruto were up early. They chose to explore Konoha, starting from the rooftops of course, since they couldn't stand to sit around the hotel doing nothing. At the moment, Naruto had no desire to deal with the Konoha villagers. They did gain some knowledge. Teams from the other main shinobi villages were scarce. They saw no one from Kiri and were aware that they were the only team from Kumo. They had not yet seen anyone from Suna and had only been able to spot one Iwa team. When the couple sensed something, they stopped. They had only ever experienced something like it once, so it was an odd chakra. They had not seen a Jinchuriki, the brother of the Raikage, since then. The fact that they could detect the demonic chakra on him impressed the man, whose name they couldn't quite recall. They seemed to benefit from their bloodline. Konoha's not supposed to have a Jinchuriki, are they? Naruto asked, turning to face Yugito. No, they're not. So either Kumo's intelligence is wronga, or one of the genin we're competing against has a Biju. Think we should take a look? Of course. The two shinobi paused to determine the chakra signature's direction before taking off. Naruto halted and gazed down at the streets as they approached. Following his eyes, Yugito saw a young boy in a pair of cat-like pajamas being threatened by a Suna shinobi. Beside him stood a kunoichi wearing purple and carrying a fan on her back. She and a pale, black-clad Konoha shinobi standing close by appeared uninterested. In contrast, a kunoichi with pink hair appeared to be begging for the boy's release. One other Konoha shinobi was standing on a nearby tree limb, a boy with raven hair and a blue shirt. Naruto grinned. A little fun was in order. Kankuro, the Suna kunoichi said, just put the kid down. You know Gaara wouldn't approve of this. He turned back to the child and saw that the scarf he was holding was now wrapped around a log. The little brat ran into me Tamari. I think I need to teach him some manners. You know, Naruto said, holding the child beside him as he stood on the branch above Sasuke. It's kind of disgraceful for a shinobi to be picking on a little kid like that. What's the matter, too scared to take on any of the ninja here? A brief surge of demonic chakra occurred as another presence entered the scene, going unnoticed by the majority of the shinobi present. Despite being aware of it, Naruto maintained a composed expression. From her hiding spot, Yugito squinted as she examined the red-haired newcomer holding the big gourd. Kankuro was angry. You talk awfully big from a distance, why don't you get down here and say that to my face? Because you don't seem to want to turn around. When Gaara and Yugito noticed that another Naruto was standing a few feet behind Kankuro, they were all taken aback. That's a bunshin up in the tree. You guys need to be a bit more perceptive. Kankuro's hand creeped toward the bandaged bundle on his back and said, why you little, but was cut off by a raspy voice. The majority of the shinobi in attendance gave another startled start, only to notice Gaara dangling upside down from a branch. Kankuro, stop it. But Gaara, he started it. You're a disgrace. Do this again and I'll kill you. Why? Yes, Gaara. Gaara emerged in front of Naruto amid a whirlpool of sand. What's your name? Araiki Naruto, though one should first offer their own name before asking another's. I am Sabaku no Gaara. You were the only one who noticed my arrival, and mother reacts strangely to your presence. I look forward to facing you soon. Hey, don't forget about me. Naruto looked at the boy who was seated in the tree. We didn't forget about you, we were ignoring you. There's a difference. How dare you speak to me like that? I'm Uchiha Sasuke. Do you randomly proclaim your name to everybody you meet? Or just the people who look like they don't give a damn? Why you? Sasuke exclaimed as he leapt from the branch and got ready to charge at the two foreign genin. The other male Konoha.nin appeared in front of them before he could approach. Sai, get out of the way. Sai swiveled his head to give his teammate a fierce look. With a somewhat fake smile, he turned to Naruto and Gaara and said, calm down Dickless, we can't afford it to start a diplomatic incident over your pride. You'll have to forgive my teammate, he can be a bit rash at times. Naruto eased out of the taijutsu stance he had taken and relaxed. Sasuke reacted angrily to the remark, that's okay, no harm done. It's nice to see that he has somebody with a bit of common sense to keep him in line. But he remained put in a rare instance where his discretion triumphed over his pride. I must say though, there seems to be more to you than meets the eye. I don't know what you're talking about Naruto.san. Of course you don't. Gaara looked back up at Naruto. Then he turned to his team and said, "I look forward to facing you again, Araiki Naruto." Without voicing any complaints, they followed him away and said, "We're leaving." Just as Naruto turned to leave, he heard a female squeal. He spun around, narrowly avoiding a pink and red blur that sped by. The Konoha Kunoichi bounced on the balls of her feet, seemingly unfazed. "It's you, isn't it? You're Namikaze Sama. I just told you, my name is Araiki Naruto." "Yeah, I heard that's the name those bastard kidnappers in Kumo gave you, but you're the Yondaime's son, aren't you?" "Yes, Konoha sent word that your Yondaime Hokage is my father. I'm Haruno Sakura. Would you like me to show you around the village? I know a bunch of good restaurants." Yugito didn't like it when other girls made advances on him, so Naruto hoped she wasn't listening. He was skeptical of that, though, and hoped even more that she would be restrained. "I'm sorry, but I need to get going so I can meet up with my teammate." Sakura rambled, but I'm sure they'd understand her, as she sensed someone else move behind her. Sasuke was incredulous. Unbeknownst to him, a third shinobi, a blonde Kumo Kunoichi, had approached within a few feet. This was intolerable. How could he outdo Itachi when so many children his age could ambush him in such a manner? Making eye contact with Yugito, Naruto mutely urged her to exercise caution. He said no, so back off. Only halfway around did Sakura turn, far enough to see a golden ponytail. This caused her to erroneously believe that Ino was standing behind her. She turned to poke Ino in the sternum to punctuate her statement. "Hey, I saw him first, Ino.pig. So you're just going to have to deal with me taking him out on a date." However, Ino was not behind her. Rather, she was confronted by a rather irate Kumo Kunoichi. As she gazed at Sakura's finger, which was jabbing her in the breast, Yugito's frown only deepened. Sakura was on the ground, face down, the next thing she knew. Sakura was pinned in place by Yugito, who had a knee resting in the small of her back and one arm twisted behind her. "I have a few lessons for you, Haruno. If a guy says no to you, listen to him. Secondly, my boyfriend is not some piece of meat to be claimed by anybody, you especially. Third, don't hit on my boyfriend. Finally, watch where you put your damn fingers. Unlike you, some of us actually have something there. Oh, and a word of warning before I forget. Don't ever refer to anybody from my village as one of those bastard kidnappers, again. You have no idea what their motives were." Gazing at the scene before him, Naruto was rubbing the back of his head sheepishly. "Well, you seem to have met my girlfriend Yugito. Chan. Do you think you could let Sakura-san up maybe?" Getting up, she approached Naruto and took his hand, saying, "So long as she can show a little more discretion. We should get going, Akana. Sensei mentioned that she wanted to meet us for lunch." Right. Well, see you guys at the Chunin exams." Konoha's Team 7 was left behind as the two Kumo.nin leapt away. "Wait," Sakura said, "the Chunin exams were never mentioned to us." After preparing breakfast for them, Akana woke Team 4 early the following day and sent them off to Konoha's Ninja Academy with some advice. "The Chunin exams can be dangerous, but as the Raikage said, the three of you should be more than ready for it." The rest of the day went by without any more incidents, and Team 4 went to bed. Just keep in mind to exercise caution, have faith in your intuition, exercise sound judgment, and keep an eye on one another. Additionally, keep in mind that you are representing Kumogakure in these exams. Make our village proud. Ka-san, don't worry, we'll be Chunin the next time you see us. I'll see you between stages of the exam. Oh, we'll be one step closer to it then. I'm sure you will. Good luck. Through the open door, Naruto peered back and said, "Thanks Ka-san, but we aren't going to need luck." "As confident as ever, I see," Akana said, laughing as the door closed. "For the first exam, he will require that." Reluctantly, Mitoku persuaded Naruto and Yugito that it would be best to walk to the academy in a civilian fashion, arguing that since they had no idea what the exams would involve, it would be best to save as much of their chakra as possible. They probably hoped that the Chunin exams would keep him out of the spotlight for the majority of his stay, but instead they made him even more eager to leave, so Naruto was relieved when they finally made it into the academy, where the stares and whispers were worse than they were back home. Naruto and Yugito slowed as they approached the top of the first flight of stairs after entering the academy through a side doorway. Mitoku, who was a few steps above them, gave them a perplexed look and said, "Something wrong?" "Genjutsu is practiced nearby. It might be a component of the test, but I don't want to rule it out before I discover what it is. The door signs on this level indicate that it's the third floor of the academy, so I'd assume it is." The rest of the team made their way to the landing in time to hear Sasuke announce the Genjutsu's presence to the entire floor, but that isn't feasible because we entered at ground level and have only ascended one flight of stairs. What an idiot, Naruto muttered. This was clearly some kind of pre-test. They sought to eliminate the less astute genin. Sai did mention that Sasuke frequently let his pride get in the way of his common sense, Yugito said, shaking her head. Well, there is nothing we can do at this time. Just let's head to the exam room. He was startled out of his reverie when he heard his teammate begin yelling that he was going to go have a youthful spar with the young Uchiha. They ascended the stairs, oblivious to the Hyuga's subtle and hateful glare. That notion didn't seem to excite their other teammate, a kunoichi with a bun. Lee, this is crazy. In just a few minutes, the exams will begin. Talk some sense into him, Neji. No, Tenten, let him go. There's something I want to take care of too. He vanished in a flurry of leaves, and Lee immediately ran off, leaving a bewildered Tenten in his wake. Neji rarely looked for pointless fights. What could possibly agitate him so much? As they were passing through the fourth training room, Team 4 noticed that there appeared to be a lot of them on the third floor of the academy. They stopped when they felt a surge of chakra, and when a figure appeared between them and the door, the smoke cleared and they saw a young male Hyuga standing there. Naruto bit back a curse, and he somehow doubted that the Hyuga clan would view him favorably, especially given the circumstances surrounding his departure from the village. He stepped forward, cautiously edging in front of Yugito and Mitoku. Hyuga-san, what are you doing here? After you were abducted 10 years ago, my father was sacrificed to please your village. A consequence of political scheming to keep you in Kumogakure. You are to blame for his death, and destiny has predetermined that you will perish as a result. He stared expectantly at the boy and trailed off. I was 2 years older. Are you anticipating my name? Just as perceptive as I'd expect from a Hyuga. Neji, I was 2 years old. I didn't ask them to kidnap me, and I didn't help make it happen. What transpired that evening was beyond my control. It's insane to blame me for it. Stop dwelling on the past. It was 10 years ago, too. Furthermore, we do not wish to incite another conflict between our villages. Kumogakure hasn't shown much concern for that in the past. Enough, Neji, you're not thinking straight. But know this, if you attack us now we'll respond in kind. He vanished in another whirl of leaves after saying, you're right, now is not the time. But I will kill you Araiki Naruto, fate has decreed it. Naruto raked his fingers through his hair and sighed. This place just keeps getting better and better, doesn't it? Juken shouldn't work too well on us, and besides, you only have to put up with it for a month. As he made his way to the door, Naruto shook his head and said, longest month of my life. They eventually left the training area and entered a normal hallway. Kakashi was standing in front of the room at the end of the hallway, which was where they were supposed to report. Is there something wrong, Kakashi-san? I wasn't aware that any Junin sensei were present. Don't let me stop you, he said, stepping aside. I'm just making sure that my team passed their test. Why are they here if you're not sure they should be taking the exams? I do believe they should be taking it, but I need to ensure that they feel the same. Okay then. Well, we should get going. When Naruto entered the room, he had to stop short to avoid bumping into a girl with dark hair. She turned, sensing his presence. Naruto turned to face another Hyuga and swore to himself. Fortunately, though, she was far less combative than Neji had been. Perspiring, she said, Gomen, excuse me. He walked past her, thankful that she was far more sensible than her relative, and said, don't worry about it. Along with this team, he passed her and took a seat farther forward in the classroom. As they proceeded, they were already looking around the room, noting who was nearby and recalling their sensei's counsel from the day before. As Akana gave them advice, Team 4 sat in their suite's common area, the genin listening. Many of the most powerful shinobi, including myself, Maeda Gai, Deidara, and the Yondaime Hokage, appear rather unassuming. If you saw them walking down the street, you wouldn't think much of them, unless you knew them, of course. Those with true power can wear it like a cloak, and they don't need piercings or anything like that to try to intimidate people. There will be a lot of genin there when you get to the exams. Most of them will be much older than you, and most of them will look extremely intimidating. Those are the ones you don't have to worry about them. You also don't need to worry about the older kids too much because the Chunin exams are very selective. The majority of shinobi who become Chunin are promoted through other channels. The first category of shinobi who take the Chunin exams are exceptionally talented genin like you, who are entered by their village to show off their abilities and bring missions to the village. Political factors may also play a part in these genin's entrance. The second category of genin you'll find in these exams are those who are unable to advance through other channels, and they take the exam because it's their last opportunity to surpass the rank of genin. Naruto's confidence grew as he observed the different genin gathered in the tiny space. Akana had told him not to worry about the majority of the genin. There was a clear chance that some of the genin in the area were an exception to the rules that Akana had explained. However, Naruto was generally more than happy to rely on her knowledge and counsel. A jolt of chakra caught his eye. A group of genin, bearing Hittites from Otogakure, were charging toward the back of the room when he turned around. They were on their way to a group of 9 Konoha genin, including the Hyuga girl and the genin team he had met the day before, who were roughly his age. An older genin with silver hair was also present. The older Konoha.nin in attendance was struck by the large, bandage-wrapped Otto.nin. Even though he leaned back and escaped the blow, his glasses broke and he fell to the ground. There was more to that punch than first glanced at, as Naruto's eyes narrowed. Even if he was foolish enough to tip his hand this early, Naruto concluded that he would still need to watch that genin. The chakra surge was much greater than the first one. Naruto's gaze shifted to the front of the space. A sizable contingent of Konoha.nin had shown up. One stood in the center, seemingly the group's leader. Wearing a bandana and trench coat, he was a scarred man. Akana had given them a crash course on Konoha and its forces, and Naruto recognized his description. The person in charge of Konoha's torture and interrogation department was Morino Ibiki. It was looking like the first test would be interesting. Nobody in the room answered, and even fewer would have dared to ask, "You sound genin, what the hell do you think you're doing? There's no unauthorized fighting in these exams. If I catch anybody pulling anything like that again, I'll fail you on the spot. Is that clear? Good. Now pay attention to my Chunin assistants. They're going to show you to your seats and I want you seated as soon as possible. I'm Morino Ibiki, and the first stage of the Chunin exams is just beginning." After a few minutes, every genin in the room had been seated according to their assigned positions. Ibiki commanded the attention of everyone in the room as he stood at the front. "You have 1 hour to finish the first stage of these exams, which consists of a written test with 10 questions and 9 of which will be distributed, and the 10th will be given to you with 15 minutes remaining. Your team's scores will be averaged to determine whether you pass, and if any member of your team receives a 0, you all fail. Okay, Gaki, pay attention, because I'm only going to say this once." A few Chunin were passing out tests throughout the room as he spoke. "The only thing left to discuss is cheating. Look around the room. All of the Konoha shinobi you see sitting at the edges are Chunin that I personally handpicked. They all have keen eyes and will be closely observing you. If you are caught cheating, you lose 2 points. If you are caught 5 times, you lose all 10 of your points and fail along with the rest of your team. You have 1 hour to complete the test, beginning now," Ibiki said as he waited for them to finish. Flipping his test over, Naruto skimmed the questions. He was shocked to learn that he could only respond to 3 of them, meaning that most genin and even lower-level Chunin would find it nearly impossible. This section of the exam didn't seem to be about the written test. After mentally reciting Ibiki's instructions, Naruto quickly realized the real goal of the test. Cheating usually resulted in instant disqualification. Here, however, it was somewhat permitted. Because of that and the difficulty of the questions, practically every genin in the room would cheat to pass. However, they would need to exercise caution because the Chunin seated at the room's edge were hawked, eyeing them. Another clue that they were expected to cheat was the presence of guards. Ibiki could have included the Hyuga clan and their Byakugan if he had truly intended to apprehend every cheater. He was giving the genin an opportunity to get away with it by not using the all-seeing eye. However, the Chunin who were present were closely observing, so it would not be simple. Nevertheless, without the Byakugan, they would have a difficult time identifying what he had planned. A small sliver of blue-gray chakra appeared between his ankles' bandages. Although it wasn't the most spectacular demonstration of his bloodline's last stage, it was sufficient to complete the task. Although Yugito would be able to employ the same strategy as him and should be alright, he was concerned about how his team would perform. Whether or not Mitoku would be able to obtain the answers was the question. All he could do was wait and see. Naruto sighed, took a seat, and shifted uneasily as he waited for his little spy to return. Naruto had completed his test with what he was fairly certain were the right answers 30 minutes later. He knew he could answer all 3 of the questions. He was forced to cross-check the responses on different papers for the remainder. After letting out another sigh, Naruto awaited the 10th question. Over the course of the following 15 minutes, a number of teams were eliminated as their luck with some of the less covert forms of cheating finally ran out. At last, Ibiki took the stage to speak once more. Eager to finish this, Naruto leaned forward slightly. Okay Gaki, you're 40. 5 minutes is up. It's time for the 10th question. But before I can give you the question, you'll have to decide whether you want to take the question, or withdraw from the exams. What? Why would we go through all of this just to back out now? Naruto exclaimed as he turned his head slightly to see a young Inuzuka getting up halfway out of his chair. Because, if you don't answer this question correctly you automatically fail, and you will be barred from ever taking these exams again. Unexpectedly, Naruto raised an eyebrow. Others in the room responded to the news with less restraint, once more displaying a lack of self-control. The Inuzuka said, "That's bullshit," adding, "There are plenty of people who've taken these exams multiple times. I guess you're just unlucky kid. This is my first year proctoring these exams. I don't care how it was done in the past, this year I decide how it works. I even have a paper signed by the leaders of all your village leaders to back me up on this. You don't have to take the question. You're free to leave, disqualifying both yourself and your team, but then you can try again later. Make your decision." Many teams left the room over the course of the following few minutes. Ibiki felt pretty good about himself. The atmosphere was deliciously tense, and the genin were dropping like flies. Everything was going smoothly. Then he saw a blonde Kumogakure shinobi who appeared to be bored. The atmosphere he had laboriously created could be destroyed if he allowed that to happen. He could get rid of a lot more genin, though, if he could break the boy. Particularly, any Konoha.nin who identified the boy as Minato's son. "You there, blondie from Kumo." Naruto's eyes went to the front of the space. "Are you talking to me or Yugito-chan?" "I'm talking to you Gaki. You seem awfully relaxed right now. Don't you realize that your future depends on this? If you take the 10th question it will decide whether you'll be able to achieve the rank of Chunin or if you'll be stuck as a genin forever." It would be an understatement to say that Ibiki was taken aback by Naruto's response. "Enough of your mind games, I'm getting bored. Just give us the damn question already." "What did you say?" "I said to give us the damn question already. I've been sitting here for the past 45 minutes while you play your mind games and guess what, you don't scare me. I've taken bigger risks before, and I have no doubt I'll face them again. So just give us the question." Ibiki had to force himself not to curse aloud. In addition to avoiding his trap, Naruto had openly disobeyed him in the process. Following that brief speech by the Yondaime's son, he could already see an increased level of eagerness in the eyes of the remaining Konoha shinobi. None of them were going to back down. Since they didn't want to be shown up by the young shinobi from Kumogakure, none of the other foreign shinobi appeared to be planning to depart either. He took a moment to absorb the growing tension before continuing, saying, "Well, if none of the rest of you are going to leave I only have one thing left to say. You all pass." "What?" Once more, the Inuzuka boy seemed unable to control his emotions. "What do you mean we pass? What happened to the 10th question?" There was no 10th question, or I suppose you could say that the decision to stay for the 10th question was the final question. The blonde Gaki pretty much had it right. As a shinobi, especially one who's reached the rank of Chunin, you'll face many difficult choices and dangerous scenarios. You may be given a mission where you need to retrieve a scroll from an enemy fortress. You have no idea what defenses are in place. Do you decline the mission because you don't want to risk your lives? Of course not. As a shinobi it is your duty to carry out the missions assigned to you, your duty to risk your lives. Anyone who isn't willing to risk their chance at becoming a Chunin isn't worthy of the rank. Ibiki saw a black ball coming toward the window just as he was ready to continue. She was doing it again, and he forced back a sigh. A black ball burst through the window, startling the majority of the genin in the room. 4 kunai were embedded into the wall and a banner was spread after a brief explosion. A recently arrived kunoichi was also visible, dressed simply in a trench coat and a fishnet skirt. Tokubetsu Junin and proctor of the second exam. Mitarashi Anko were written on the banner behind her. Anko noticed Ibiki as he moved around the banner's edges and cleared his throat. "You're Aaliyah again. You also broke the window again. Pretty soon the Hokage's going to start taking that out of your pay." Anko showed no signs of hearing him. "Are you going soft on me here Ibiki? Just look at all the genin still left. Maybe we just have a better crop of examinees this time around." She turned to the genin, who were still seated at their desks, and said, "Whatever, that just leaves more for me to play with. I guarantee that when I'm done I'll cut their numbers by at least half. Okay Gaki, get out of your seats and follow me. The second exam is up next." She wasted no time in turning and leaping out of the shattered window. The other genin hurriedly left their seats to follow. Many of the genin found it difficult to keep up with Enko's rapid pace as he led them along the rooftops. A few minutes later she was back on Earth, landing in front of a looming chain link fence that surrounded a large area of forest. Uncharacteristically patient, she waited for the remaining genin to arrive while leaning against a tree. After just a minute or so, she got up to speak to the genin gathered. Okay, this is Training Ground 44, also known as the Forest of Death. It's where your second exam is going to take place. You're going to be in there for a 5-day survival exercise. 5 days, Naruto said, turning to see a somewhat plump Konoha.nin speaking an Akamichi. If he was correct, what are we supposed to do for food? She took 2 scrolls out of her trench coat and said, kill something, there's plenty of food in the forest. Course that includes you, some of the beasts in that place can get pretty big. Anyways, these are your objectives. The kanji for heaven and earth were in one person's possession. Each team will be given a gate and one of these 2 scrolls prior to the exam starting. With a tower in the middle and gates evenly spaced around the outside, the Forest of Death is a perfect circle. You will have 5 days from the start of the exam to gather both scrolls and travel to the tower in the middle of the forest. Until you reach the tower with both scrolls in your possession, you cannot open them. Anything goes once you enter the forest. You are free to employ any method you choose and apply as much force as you like. It was always fun to incite fear and chaos, so she narrowed her eyes and decided to make an example of Naruto, who was essentially ignoring her as she was speaking, saying, killing is allowed. Her hand moved to her kunai pouch and drew one covertly, then flicked it abruptly, aiming to cut Naruto's cheek. She then moved, vanishing from view of nearly every genin in the room. Naruto had seen her hand move from the start and could tell quite easily that he was the object of her attention, so he was underestimating him. This behavior hardly seems befitting of a Proctor Mitarashi.san. He sprang into action simultaneously with Anko, catching the kunai by the ring of its handle with a snap of his hand, spinning it on his finger to secure a backhanded grip, and then thrusting it back over his shoulder to stop her half an arm's length away, allowing the point to rest lightly in the center of Anko's hitate. Anko couldn't help but smile in spite of the circumstances. There's more to you than meets the eye, isn't there, Namikaze-kun? She had to move fast, returning to her previous position just before Yugito's fist went through the area where Anko's head had been. If the Konoha girls would stop making advances on my boyfriend, that would be greatly appreciated. It's Araiki, not Namikaze, by the way. Kumo appears to have sent a team that is quite intriguing this year. In any case, this is a waiver, she said, taking a piece of paper from her coat. To release Konoha from all liability in the event of your deaths, you will all need to sign this. You are not eligible if you do not sign one. The forms will be distributed by these chunin. Turn them in at that tent over there after the 3 of you have completed one. After that, a chunin will deliver your scroll and lead you to the gate that has been assigned to you. Without hesitation, Team 4 completed their waivers and was given an earth scroll. After being led a quarter of the way around the forest to their gate by one of the chunin, the team took a seat to wait for the exams to start. Mitoku looked at his teammates and said, should we talk about our plan for the second exam? No, not yet, Yugito said, turning to face the chunin proctor. Hold off until we enter the forest. After inserting his key into the gate's lock, the chunin grinned and said, always cautious, a good trait for a shinobi. He removed the lock and stood in front of the gate for a few minutes, gazing at his watch. All right, you have 5 days starting now. As Team 4 moved into the forest, 3 blurs sped past him as he threw open the door and took a step to the side. As they advanced farther into the Forest of Death, Team 4 leapt from tree to tree. I assume that the 2 of you have a plan, Mitoku said. Yeah, we're going to go into the forest a bit then spiral inwards. Some of the weaker teams might be a bit tentative and stick to the edges, so with luck we can pick one of them off. Yugito, Chan and myself will alternate keeping a Shiki no 2. Rimu active to give us a better chance of finding people. Seems like a sound plan, Mitoku said, nodding. His Ashiki no 2. Rimu blazed to life as Naruto grinned and said, of course it does, it was my idea after all. Then, with his teammates falling in behind him, he advanced to take the ball. No other teams were visible for several hours. Then, just beyond her field of vision, Yugito detected 3 chakra signatures. After a brief conversation, Team 4 took off, moving in the direction of their objectives. Soon after, the Arikis detected the arrival of yet another set of chakra signatures. There are 6 of them, should we still go in? I don't see why not, Yugito replied. That just makes it a 3-way battle instead of a 2-way one. And if there are 2 of them, it's more likely that we'll find a heaven scroll. To top it off, if we get a third scroll, that's one less team that can advance to the next round. Mitoku added his thoughts after momentarily adjusting the way his katana swung on his back. I concur, the situation remains favorable. There is no reason to abort the attack. Looks like we're all in agreement then. A few minutes later, Team 4 landed opposite a team of AIM.nin in a forest clearing. With a sly smile, the AIM.nin at the front looked at the Kumo team. Well, looks like the timing of things couldn't have been more perfect. Why? Because you wanted to lose your scroll within the day. As he said that, the second set of chakra signatures appeared in the form of another team of AIM.nin, which landed next to the first. No, because we have help coming. Our two teams decided to cooperate for this test. You're outnumbered, there's no way you can win. Naruto didn't display any signs of concern. Have you ever heard the phrase quality over quantity? We may be outnumbered, but you're outclassed. I'm in a good mood though, so I'm willing to offer you a deal. If you give us one of your scrolls, preferably a heaven scroll, I'll let you keep the other one and leave you uninjured. He called out to Mitoku and Naruto, saying, are you an idiot? You're outnumbered 2 to 1, and since you won't surrender we're going to kill you all. Well, at least you two, adding, the girl we can have a bit of fun with. Naruto looked at Yugito and said, Yugito. Chan don't, but she left before he could finish. Do anything rash, he said quietly. With a hand on each shoulder and Chikara no to. Rimu in motion, Yugito reappeared before the boy who had spoken. Interesting look on you. What's the matter? Can't wait until. The boy grinned, but he was interrupted when Yugito jerked her knee up. There was a loud crunch as the boy's pelvis broke, and all the boys in the clearing flinched. The boy let out a silent cry of agony before collapsing, thankfully unconscious. Two of the AIM.nin moved to exploit Yugito's vulnerability to a counterattack, which she had left open in her rage. But Naruto was quicker. He vanished from sight and arrived in Yugito ahead of the AIM.nin, even though he had 4 times the distance to travel. The first AIM.nin's attack was easily parried by him. The boy lost his balance and staggered away as a result of his parry, which sent the attack flying wide. That gave him the opportunity to turn and face the other AIM.nin who was approaching. He easily ducked under his opponent's attack and struck twice. He struck the AIM.nin across the face with his first blow. Naruto kicked him as he staggered back. By catching his opponent in the stomach, it doubled him over and made it possible for his claws to pierce the AIM.nin's abdomen deeply. The rest of the AIM.nin charged at that point. They simply didn't learn, Naruto said, shaking his head. He slid alongside Yugito, who had somewhat calmed down. The two waited for their chance while calmly observing the 4 AIM.nin who were attacking. Mitoku supplied it by hurling a torrent of electrically charged senbon. The AIM.nin received a serious shock after blocking them with kunai. Their muscles spasmed violently and they were stunned by the electrical charge. All the Arikis needed was the opening. After about 45 seconds, they were standing above the unconscious bodies of 5 AIM.nin. With fear visible in her eyes, the 6th was lying at the foot of a nearby tree. While searching through pouches on the defeated shinobi, Naruto remarked, I know we're good. But still, there were 6 of them. You'd think they would have put up more of a fight. While Naruto discovered an earth scroll on a member of the opposing team, Yugito opened a pouch and pulled out a scroll of heaven. Maybe we're just better than we thought we were. Guess so, Naruto said, turning to look at the only mostly unharmed AIM.nin. Well, I told you I was in a good mood today, so I'll leave you conscious to stand guard over your comrades. A word of advice though, learn how to gauge your opponents better. In a flash, Team 4 disappeared. As they jumped through the trees, Mitoku said, we should head straight to the tower. There's no reason to risk staying out here any longer than is necessary. Our objective is complete. Naruto looked down at his bloodied hands and feet and said, I agree for the most part. But let's find a stream or lake to stop at first. Yugito. Chan and I would like to clean up a bit. Very well. They found a suitable body of water in a matter of minutes. By a little cliff. A stream flowed off its edge and into a deep pool below. Naruto jumped in after shrugging out of his GI. Without even making a splash, he dove into the water, sank nearly to the bottom, and then kicked his way to the top. After that, he paddled to the shallower waters close to the coast, where he and Yugito scrubbed blood off his feet and hands. After a few minutes, Naruto was tying his GI back into place and they were clean. At that point, it happens. The clearing was overtaken by a strong wave of murderous intent. Before they could repel it, Yugito and Naruto staggered to their feet, trembling for a few seconds. Mitoku wasn't quite as strong, and the weight of the hate in the air caused him to collapse to the ground. Ku. You two managed to resist my killing intent. With a quick turn of his head, Naruto saw the figure that appeared on the other side of the pool. His face was marked with purple and his skin was white, and he had long black hair. He was dressed in clothing that Naruto had seen on Akusa.nin earlier in the test. He made up his mind not to find out what had happened to her, because he recognized Orochimaru, a shinobi from the Densetsu no Sannin, standing in front of him. Orochimaru chose to attack the two Arikis without replying, saying, "What the hell are you doing here, Orochimaru? You seem a little advanced for this test. Did you get demoted down to Genin level or something?" As they triggered Megurushi no 2. Rimu, they dispersed and leapt away. Before Naruto even touched down, Orochimaru materialized in front of him and delivered a vicious barrage of punches and kicks in midair. After successfully blocking the first few, Naruto was struck in the face. The Genin was momentarily rendered vulnerable by the force of the blow, which dazed him. Orochimaru only needed a moment to plant his foot in the boy's stomach, causing him to fall into the pool below. Orochimaru landed lightly on the water's surface and waited for the boy to come out. He saw Naruto leap out of the water with a splash. Orochimaru dodged the boy's blows with ease, almost as if bored. He punched Naruto, effortlessly piercing his defenses and striking the young Genin across the face. "How disappointing, Naruto-kun. I was expecting better from you." Naruto vanished in a crackle of electricity, and he was mildly shocked for his efforts. Sweden. Suiru no Jutsu. Naruto emerged from the water in front of him, cautiously keeping contact with the newly created sphere of water that contained the snake Sannin, and Orochimaru smiled. "Impressive, Naruto-kun, pulling off a deception like that without me noticing. Apparently I underestimated you, even if you don't seem to know how to use that jutsu properly." "What do you mean? It's true that this jutsu will prevent me from attacking you, but it prevents you from attacking me as well. Furthermore, I can tell that you're not using a clone this time. So you can't even run away from me. It's just a waste of chakra. Unless I just needed to immobilize you." As Mantoru no 2. Rimu activated, chakra oozed from Naruto's skin and transformed into a fox. It changed almost instantly, taking on a lighter hue and acquiring innumerable fine edges. Orochimaru became more and more impressed with the boy's ability to perform a wind recomposition of that magnitude while still using water jutsu. Indeed, he would need to be careful to enlist this boy. "Like you said, Orochimaru, you underestimated me. Now you'll pay the price for it. Yugito. Chan, let him have it." "Right, Raiden. Raitama Enden." Yugito braced it with her free hand and held out an arm as she completed the seals. From her palm, several lightning strikes erupted, each striking the water pool. The water instantly caused the explosion, exposing everything in its path to thousands of volts of electricity. By shorting out Yugito's attack before it could reach him, Naruto's dominant affinity shielded him from the wind chakra cloak. Orochimaru was unable to practice any jutsu within the water prison, so he took full advantage of the electricity. However, Naruto's joy was short-lived as Orochimaru vanished into a mound of mud. His eyes widened as he felt a sudden surge of chakra. "Damn," Naruto muttered, "he didn't underestimate us as much as I had hoped." A moment before the enormous snake struck the area where he had just been standing, he leapt aside. He was clipped along the side because he was not quick enough to avoid the flailing tail. His mantle of wind chakra sliced deep into the cliffside as he was hurled into it. The blow was also paid for by the snake, who developed a bloody gouge on his tail where he had struck it. "Yugito. Chan, we need to take out that snake," Naruto said as he hauled himself out of the cliffside hole. "Yeah, let off. Got it, Fuden. Daitopa." Shortly after Naruto, Yugito completed her own set of hand seals. "Kaden. Karyu Enden," she exclaimed, spitting a fierce stream of fire. It expanded into a concussive blast of heat and flame after colliding with Naruto's blast of wind. Orochimaru bounded forward. But his snake could not move fast enough to avoid the blast. It was reduced to ash and bone after being forced to confront the attack head-on. Orochimaru noticed that the two were getting close to the end of another set of seals as the blast subsided. His face lit up with excitement. This might be interesting. Fuden. Furyuden. Kaden. Karyuden. Coils of wind whirled around Naruto, transforming into a massive wind-based dragon. Simultaneously, Yugito spat out a fire dragon of comparable size. The two dragons took off they flew a Vera in the direction of Orochimaru. His eyes widened. They had found his clone, and now the branch he was hiding his true self on was being attacked by both of them. The two blows collided as he was about to jump out of the way. A burst of white-hot flames erupted, piercing the forest in all directions. In a moment, hundreds of feet of trees were turned to ash. But the destruction went far beyond that. The bases of many more trees were burned through, causing them to topple over. The whole place was ash. Black. Fires were burning at the boundaries of the devastation zone. The only reason they weren't burning everywhere was because the initial blast had used up all of their fuel. Both Yugito and Naruto were panting heavily. The pair had not yet perfected those strong, chakra intensive jutsus. In spite of the Araki's extraordinary endurance, they suffered a great deal. Think we got him, Yugito-chan? Kami, I hope so. But when they heard the freak's sick laughter echoing behind them, their hopes were dashed. Ku, to think that you're already capable of attacks of that level. You two are skilled, geniuses, perhaps even more so than Sasuke-kun. With undisguised awe and even a trace of fear, Naruto gazed at the man. How did you avoid that attack? You were there when it hit, I'm sure of it. I could feel your chakra signature there. I can do many things that you couldn't even imagine. Someday, you might get to learn them. As the Arikis deciphered the underlying meaning of that final statement, he received two glowers. You're dreaming if you think you can make us abandon Kumogakure. His neck abruptly grew longer and split in two as he said, but you haven't even seen what I have to offer yet. Naruto and Yugito attempted to jump out of the way, but Orochimaru was too quick and determined. At the next slope, his teeth dug into each of them. To Orochimaru's surprise, neither genin was overcome by the pain, even though they both winced. While he was applying the curse seal to mark them, nobody had been able to move. However, the Arikis could. Orochimaru was grasped by both of them at the base of his skull. Naruto said, "You got sloppy, Orochimaru," and although he didn't express it, there was pain in his voice. Naruto was pleased to see Orochimaru's eyes widen with concern when he said, "I thought you of all people would know to keep track of all your opponents." At last, Mitoku had repelled Orochimaru's desire to kill him and stood up. Ordinarily, Orochimaru wouldn't have been even concerned about this. But it could have been dangerous, with his head immobilized and 50 feet from his body. Electricity crackled from the katana Mitoku had drawn on his back. He dodged Orochimaru's awkward thrust and plunged forward, driving his blade deep into Orochimaru's body. Orochimaru felt electricity burst through his limbs and torso. The energy flowing through the Sannin caused his flesh to burn, but he didn't flinch. Using the sword he was impaled on as a guide, he swept his arm out in a backhand strike. Unable to respond in time, Mitoku was launched into the air. Orochimaru took hold of the katana's hilt and drew, happy to have it taken away from him, but he was still in the woods. Because Yugito and Naruto both struck at an unspoken cue. With their claws spread wide, they both removed one hand from Orochimaru's skull. Yugito's claws exploded with electricity, while Naruto's turned into an outline of wind. Natured chakra. The neck that held him was sliced cleanly by Naruto, but he was let down when it merely turned into a snake. It seemed he had gotten the replica. Yugito's neck jerked violently, escaping the clutches of the only hand that held it. However, he was unable to completely avoid Yugito's blow. She gave him another electric shock after making 3 deep cuts on the side of his neck. When Orochimaru's neck returned to its natural length, he was able to see the Ariki's injuries for the first time. Both were bleeding profusely and releasing a dark chakra into the atmosphere. He scowled because the chakra he had injected into them ought to have been carried to the brain by their natural chakra flow. Once there, it could firmly establish its impact on them. But something seemed to be getting in the way of that. It had not gone at all as he had hoped, particularly in light of his own injuries. Of course, they were nothing he couldn't handle. However, he was aware that Anko would need to be dealt with before he could leave that forest, and she was more aware of his abilities than he was of hers. He wanted to make sure he was prepared for her, but he wasn't afraid to face her. It was hard to call him in his current state of burns and bleeding. Furthermore, their combined dragon blasts had been a tremendous assault. It was far more than any of the genin would have been expected to do in the exams. Someone was probably already on their way because it was certain to attract attention. Even though he felt bad about it, he would have to stop playing with the young Arikis because his cursed seal was no longer effective on them. He might still be able to persuade them to agree with him if he was lucky. If not, he had at least marked Sasuke. In any event, his foray into the forest had been productive. The two of you are simply full of surprises, quite delightful. I'm afraid I must cut our playtime short, but my offer to you still stands. I can give you more power than you can imagine, remember that. He then left. Mitoku climbed to his feet with a groan. I believe that his last attack may have broken a few of my ribs. How are the two of you faring? Yugito took a seat at a tree's base. Her wound, which still had blood and chakra flowing freely from it, was clamped by a hand. We've been better. He tried to inject us with some sort of foreign chakra. Our system is fighting it, preventing it from gaining a foothold in our system. Apparently the foreign chakra is also being expelled from our systems. However, that seems to be interfering with our normal accelerated healing. We'll have to bandage these wounds. You've never needed to tend to superficial wounds before. I know, it's troubling. In a puff of smoke, Naruto opened a roll of bandages. It's definitely because of that chakra he injected us with. I just wish I knew what it was. Next time I see an auto.nin I'm going to beat it out of them. He motioned to Yugito. Here, I'll bandage that up for you. Yeah, sure. She skillfully untied her top, allowing it to gather around her waist and exposing only her bra on her torso. Go ahead. Yugito. Chana. What? Well, due to the location of the puncture wound I'll need to wrap your bandages around your torso and under your other arm. So, you're, going to have to take your bra off. The strap's in the way. What? He looked apologetic at the red-faced, sputtering Yugito and said, the strap would get trapped underneath the bandage, it has to be moved. You could cover them with your hands. After a moment of frowning, she responded. She said, gesturing to Mitoku, turn around now. Mitoku wasted no time in responding. Yugito turned around as well, hurriedly taking off her bra and covering herself as best she could with her hands. Naruto started putting the bandages on. Hey, remember back at the daimyo's palace when you dropped in on me when I was in the onsen? Yeah, what about it? Yugito wished she had a free hand to slap her boyfriend with, but Naruto grinned and said, karma's a bitch, isn't? Anko moved through the forest of death as a blur. Below her, trees fluttered by while a mix of anger and anxiety tore at her insides. About 30 minutes ago, she was shown 3 dead Kusa.nin by one of the Chunin proctors for the exams. But it was the fact that one of them had lost its face that truly grabbed her attention. Only Orochimaru's jutsu could be it. She didn't know why he was here, but she didn't think it was a social call. She had gone into the forest of death herself after sending the Chunin to retrieve the Anbu Black Ops. She made the decision that neither she nor her betraying sensei would leave an encounter if they did meet. Then, she sensed his presence. It swept over her like a greasy movie. She pulled a kunai out of her holster and stopped. Show yourself, Orochimaru. He emerged from behind the tree in front of her, and she tightened her hold on her kunai, asking, where are your manners, Anko? Chan? You haven't seen your sensei for years and that's how you greet him. I taught you better than that. She wasted no time in throwing the kunai at him, only to growl in disgust when he caught it between his fingers. Manners, do you have any idea what I've gone through since you betrayed this village, since you gave me this mark, not to mention the crimes you've committed against Konoha? What you've done can't be forgiven, Orochimaru, and you'll die for it today, she said. Now Anko. Chan, he said as he started to sink into the tree, I don't have time to play with you at the moment. There are several prospects I've been testing in this forest. Besides, if I let you keep me here long enough for the Anbu to arrive I just might have to kill you. She reached out and yelled, like hell you're getting away, bastard. Sen Eijashu. As snakes emerged from her trench coat sleeve, diving into the tree and dragging Orochimaru in her direction. He was drawn in, and she caught his hand, pressing it into the same seal as hers. Using that jutsu, Anko. Chan, are you really that desperate? She felt a sting on her wrist as the snakes in her sleeve bit both of them, saying, shut up you bastard. Now you pay for your crimes. A little more time would give them both a deadly dose of poison. Even though she might not live, she would at least be able to eliminate the person who had destroyed her life. Then, right before Orochimaru vanished into a heap of mud, she sensed a shift in the feel of his hand. She knew the battle was lost even though she had cancelled the jutsu. Anko collapsed to her knees, the poison already making it difficult for her to breathe. She felt her treacherous ex-sensei approaching her, but she was hardly able to move or even lift her head. You've improved quite a bit, Anko. Chan, you must be Junin level by now. It appears that my tutelage hasn't gone entirely to waste. You're still too soft though, unwilling to utilize all of your resources. The cursed seal I gave you can provide with power should you need it. I've wasted enough time on you now though, just give a message to the Hokage for me. He relaxed and Anko could feel his soothing breath against her ear. He vanished in a whirl of leaves after saying, tell him that if he stops these exams I will destroy this village. After their battle with Orochimaru, Team 4 hadn't gone very far. They had only made enough progress to locate a suitable hiding place before retiring for the night. The following day they left, heading straight for the tower. Naruto abruptly stopped while he was taking aim. To keep from crashing into him, Yugito had to cling to an overhead branch. "What was that for?" she asked, giving him a grumpy look. "Cast about a bit, Yugito-chan, see if you can find anything." Before answering, she closed her eyes and focused for a moment. "I can sense 6 chakra signatures in the distance. Yeah, 3 of them are that Konoha team we ran into along with those Suna.nin. The other 3 belong to those Auto.nin that made the scene at the start of the first exam. Orochimaru was wearing a Hitate from Otogakure when he attacked us. I think it's time to get some answers." Yugito paused only a moment before answering. "Agreed, let's go." A few minutes later, they reached the battlefield. The only person on her team who was moving around was Sakura. Under some kind of tree. Root cavern, Sasuke and Sai lay unconscious. Also, Sasuke's chakra seemed a little strange. Something else was there. A vile taint similar to the chakra still seeping from the Ariki's neck wounds. Sakura was left with her back to her unconscious teammates as the 3 Auto.nin dispersed throughout the clearing. Another genin was there, a Konoha.nin with green spandex and a bowl cut. His ears were bleeding as he lay on the ground. Naruto leaned forward slightly and spoke in a whisper to his teammates. "Mitoku, we need you to disable the right arm of that bandaged Auto.nin. He did something strange with it back before the first exam, probably something to do with that weird gauntlet he's wearing." "I understand. Leave him to me. Yugito, do you want to take the kunoichi or that spiky-haired kid?" "I'll take the kunoichi, see if she's up to my standards." "I find that unlikely." He invoked Megurushi no to Rimu by briefly tapping his chakra. "You ready, Mitoku?" "Yes." Mitoku gave a single nod before throwing a senbon covered in a gleam of electricity, saying, "Good, let us off. And remember, we want these guys alive." Auto.nin, who was bandaged, must have heard a blow. He whirled around, deflecting the senbon with that gauntlet. In that case, it was most likely the worst choice. The gauntlet immediately conducted the electricity that had been stored in the senbon into the Auto.nin's arm. His limp arm twitched at his side as he fell back. As Team 4 advanced to face their targets, 3 blurs emerged from the bushes. Naruto lunged at his target, who just managed to jump to the side. With his weight on his heels, he was steadily retreating, already in trouble. He only had one effective defense against Naruto's flurry of taijutsu attacks. Even though he was unsteady, it was his only chance in an act of desperation. He held up a hand and lined up Naruto with a hole in his palm. Zanka, ha! He was blown to the ground by the blast of pressurized air that blasted from his hand, destroying everything in its path. "Hey, that kid wasn't so tough after all. Only took me 1 shot." He tensed abruptly as a kunai was placed at his throat by a hand glimmering with blue-gray chakra. "Hardly, that attack's far too slow to hit me when Shite no 2. Rimu is activated. I'd advise a surrender here." Yugito's situation was similarly straightforward. Yugito felt the brushings of a genjutsu at the corners of her senses as her opponent rang a bell. She easily shook it off, but she didn't move. Apparently that was sufficient to convince the girl that she had succeeded. She continued to ring the bell as she approached. Too easy, so many ninja neglect training to counteract genjutsu. Knowing that her opponent would soon be within arm's length, Yugito waited calmly. Yugito struck the side of her neck with a single knife blow when she was. Without making a sound, the kunoichi dropped. Mitoku stood before the last of the Auto.nin, watching the metal gauntlet with suspicion. Mitoku turned his head slightly, revealing the Konoha.nin in spandex. He uses sound. That gauntlet he wears produces sound that he uses to disrupt the balance of his opponents. What is the range of the effect? I'm not certain. I fought him hand to hand. Mitoku reached behind him and pulled out his katana, saying, "I see, thank you for the information. I'll handle things from here." He was mentally assessing the situation. It was unclear how far his opponent's attack would reach. But that gauntlet was probably going to block ranged attacks. This would theoretically increase the range and power of his opponent's attack because the resulting metal clang would be more intense than in most other situations. This should be completed up close, being careful not to let the gauntlet come into contact with anything else. Fortunately, his opponent's gauntlet wearing right arm would be out of commission for a while. With his katana out in front of him, Mitoku charged. The gauntlet appeared in front of the Auto.nin as he spun around, his momentum carrying it. It was a good placement that would have caused Mitoku's intended attack to be loudly parried. He avoided the gauntlet by swerving to the left instead. The Auto.Nin whirled, trying to keep his gauntlet between that sword and himself. It was just what Mitoku had anticipated. He turned around and threw himself low, digging his foot into the earth. After passing beneath the gauntlet, he experienced a moment of confusion. However, he had taken his opponent by surprise and failed to take advantage of the situation. The Auto.Nin's hamstrings were severed when Mitoku's katana slashed across in a stream of blood. He hit the ground with his face down. He moved swiftly, placing his hands on the ground to help him stand, but he stopped when he sensed the katana's tip pressing against the base of his skull. Looking around, Mitoku saw that the other two Auto.Nin had also lost. It's over. A nervous-looking Team 10 came out of the bushes as Naruto gestured to some bushes off to the side of the clearing. "Yeah," Naruto said. "You guys can come out now." Saying, "Been a while, hasn't it?" Naruto gave them a quick smile. "Are you going to attack us?" Shikamaru asked, giving him a wary look. Naruto said, "Nope." He pulled some ninja wire from his pouch and bound his prisoner's hands together, making sure that the holes in his palms faced one another. "We have some other things to worry about right now. These guys here should be a good source of information for us." "Information on what?" Naruto finished binding his prisoner and turned to face the Konoha.Nin in green on the ground. "Aw, sorry, but a shinobi has to keep some secrets. I must admit though, I'm curious as to why you're here. I know you're not on their team." "Yash, I am Rock Lee and have promised to protect Sakura-chan with my life. Even were that not the case, Sakura and her team are fellow Konoha.Nin who were in danger. I could not just stand by and watch them get killed." Given his condition, Naruto was a little surprised by the boy's enthusiasm and energy, but he nodded in agreement. "That's a good outlook, Lee, and sound judgment. Too many of the genin here would let the circumstances of the exam overrule the camaraderie they should feel among genin from the same village. It's good to see that." As Naruto spun around, his sentence was abruptly interrupted. The clearing was suddenly filled with a surge of chakra. Like the chakra that still oozed from his injured shoulder, but far more powerful, it was dark and evil. Now, Sasuke stood, encircled by a flaming field of black and purple chakra and covered in odd black markings. He looked down at his hands and said, "This power is amazing. I must test it." He looked up, and when he saw Naruto, his face twisted into a maniacal grin. "Yes, you'll do perfectly." Sasuke hurried Naruto with what seemed like unnatural speed to most genin. If Naruto's bloodline was dormant, he would hardly be able to compete with it. However, he was still a little worried even though he was able to avoid the Uchiha with ease. He was concerned about a couple of things, well, two. The first was the apparent power boost Sasuke received. He could feel the vile chakra he was releasing, which was strikingly similar to the one Orochimaru had attempted to mark him with. Additionally, he wanted to ensure that Sasuke didn't murder their detainees before questioning them. "You know, this is rather ungrateful of you. We just saved your team from some attacking Auto.Nin and you turn around and attack us. That means nothing to me. I have to test myself, test my power. I need to get stronger in order to beat him. You shouldn't seek strength for its own sake, Uchiha, or for vengeance. That leads down a dangerous path." "Shut up." Sasuke stepped forward once more and recklessly threw himself at Naruto. Naruto had a speed advantage because his Megurushi no Rimu was active. Naruto was thankful that Sasuke was unable to use his own Kekai Genkai because he appeared to be too preoccupied with that peculiar chakra. Although it probably wouldn't have been sufficient to give Sasuke the advantage, the Sharingan would have helped level the playing field. As Sasuke's fist flew in, Naruto grabbed it, twisted it, and used the leverage to knock Sasuke away. "Calm down, Uchiha, this isn't really the best time to fight." Sasuke snarled, but before he could charge, a pair of arms encircled him from behind. "Sasuke-kun," Sakura said in a distressed voice. She was, in fact, sobbing into Sasuke's shoulder. Sasuke appeared to relax after hearing the words. "Stop it, Sasuke-kun. What's happened to you?" He calmed down considerably after taking several deep breaths. Before disappearing to a mark on his neck, the marks on his arms and face turned a shade of orange and red. With caution, Naruto approached and peered down at Sasuke's neck, which was exposed by his shirt. On his shoulder, he could see the final markings fade into a 3. Tomo mark. "Orochimaru did that, didn't he? How did you know that?" Sakura asked, giving him a suspicious look. To highlight the bandages around his neck and shoulder, Naruto pulled the shoulder of his gi aside. As two more chakra signatures entered the scene, There was a sudden flare of murderous intent. He tried to do the same thing to us, but it didn't mix well with our bloodline. We came here because we sensed the auto. Nin's chakra. Orochimaru was wearing a sound hitate, so I'm hoping those three can give us some insight as to his motives. With a slow turn, Naruto said, "Hello Neji, to what do I owe this pleasure?" "What did you do to Lee?" Neji glared at Naruto, his eyes narrowing. "We saved him from these Auto.Nin, Naruto said, gesturing to the other members of his team. "I assume he's your teammate." "Yes," Neji said, activating his Byakugan, "but that doesn't change anything." Lee appeared abruptly between Naruto and Neji, seemingly overcoming his confusion. "Neji.Kun, he said, would be most unyouthful to attack Naruto.Kun right now, as he just helped us against the Auto.Nin. I don't care."
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.